At a family dinner, my husband Colin's cousin, a lieutenant, smirked. "You are in the Navy. Let me guess, your main job is posing for recruitment posters to meet diversity quotas." Then his father looked at me and asked, "What is your call sign?" The room went dead silent. My name is Megan, 33 years old, and somehow still healing from wounds my family inflicted. As a successful Navy pilot, I escaped their toxicity, but maintained occasional contact. Last Sunday, they invited me to an upscale anniversary dinner to catch up. Between expensive wine and caviar, my mother-in-law leaned forward smirking. "You know, Megan, you are lucky we even include you. Pity goes a long way." I simply sipped my water and smiled. That night, I dropped a single word that shattered their entire reality. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood in Ohio meant survival to me, but to my wealthy in-laws it meant I was nothing. Inside their sprawling estate, emotional coldness permeated every corner. The massive dining room with its imported chandeliers and custom mahogany table was a fortress of expectations I was never supposed to meet. I had spent a decade playing the quiet, dutiful wife to my husband Colin, enduring his family's relentless, polished cruelty. They assumed I was just a desk clerk, a girl who married up to escape poverty. They had absolutely no idea who I really was. The occasion was the 40th wedding anniversary of Colin's parents, Beatrice and Arthur. We were gathered at their sprawling mansion in an exclusive gated community just outside of Washington, D.C. The dining room was suffocatingly opulent. Heavy velvet curtains framed floor-to-ceiling windows, and the long dining table groaned under the weight of catered gourmet dishes, crystal decanters, and silver serving trays. I sat quietly near the corner of the table wearing a simple but elegant black dress that Beatrice had explicitly criticized the moment I walked through the front door. She had looked me up and down, adjusted her own diamond necklace, and muttered that it was a shame I still shopped off the rack for such a milestone family event. I had merely smiled and taken my seat, long accustomed to her relentless need to make me feel small. Across the table sat Trent Colin's arrogant cousin. Trent was 30 years old, a Navy Supply Corps lieutenant, and a man who believed the entire military apparatus revolved around his logistical spreadsheets. He wore his uniform to a private family dinner, a clear cry for attention, and a desperate attempt to assert dominance in a room full of wealthy defense contractors. His chest puffed out with unearned pride as he regaled the table with exaggerated stories of his desk job, dropping acronyms and military jargon to impress his father, Harrison. Harrison was a completely different kind of predator. As the CEO of a major defense contracting firm, he viewed every interaction as a transaction. He was a ruthless businessman whose company was currently bleeding money, desperate for a massive government software contract to stay afloat. Harrison sat at the head of the table, swirling an expensive glass of bourbon, occasionally nodding at Trent's boastful stories, but mostly scanning the room like a hawk looking for weak prey. He had always dismissed me entirely, viewing Colin's working-class wife as an unfortunate stain on their pristine family tree. The conversation inevitably shifted to me, as it always did, when the family ran out of achievements to brag about and needed a target to mock. Trent leaned back in his chair, a smug, punchable grin spreading across his face. He looked at me with eyes full of condescending pity. "So Colin tells me you are still doing that Navy thing," Trent said, his voice loud enough to silence the rest of the table. "What is it you actually do over there, Megan? Sort paperwork? Answer phones?" I placed my fork down carefully, maintaining a completely neutral expression. "I work in aviation," I replied calmly. Trent burst into loud theatrical laughter. "Aviation, right. Let me guess, your main job is posing for recruitment posters to meet diversity quotas. You know, the ones they stick in high school hallways to convince people that the military is inclusive. You are just a poster girl for the public affairs office. It is cute that they let you wear the uniform, though." The absolute disrespect in his voice was staggering, but what hurt more was the silence from my husband. Colin sat beside me, his eyes glued to his plate, completely unwilling to defend his wife against his cousin's blatant sexism. He had always been terrified of disrupting the family harmony, preferring to let me absorb their venom rather than stand up for the woman he married. Before I could formulate a response, Beatrice chimed in, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness that hit a razor-sharp edge. She picked up her empty crystal wineglass and held it out across the table directly toward me. "Oh, Trent, do not tease her," Beatrice said, shaking the empty glass slightly. Well, Megan always did prefer the easy way out, just like when she chose that awful state school over an Ivy League to save pennies. She simply does not have the pedigree for real ambition. "Megan, be a dear and fetch another bottle of the Pinot from the cellar. My glass is empty." This single action, this casual command to fetch her wine, was the culmination of a decade of abuse. For 10 years, Beatrice had treated me not as a daughter-in-law, but as the family maid. At every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every Sunday brunch, I was the one expected to clear the plates, wash the dishes, and serve the drinks, while the rest of the family discussed their stock portfolios and country club memberships. She never let me forget that I grew up in a tiny house with parents who worked multiple jobs just to keep the lights on. To Beatrice, poverty was a character flaw, and my presence in her home was an act of extreme charity on her part. She sat there, her hand outstretched with the empty glass waiting for me to submit. The entire table watched their faces, a mixture of amusement and expectation. They wanted me to lower my head, take the glass, and walk down to the dark cellar like a dutiful servant. They wanted me to swallow my pride, just as I had done for 10 long years to keep Colin happy. But I did not cry. I did not argue. I did not reach for the glass. I calmly folded my linen napkin, placed it on the table, and looked directly at Beatrice. The silence stretched thick and suffocating. Beatrice's smug smile faltered slightly as her outstretched arm began to tremble from the effort of holding the heavy crystal glass in the air. "I am not your waitress, Beatrice," I said, my voice steady and resonant in the quiet room. "If you want more wine, you can fetch it yourself." Gasps echoed around the table. Trent slammed his hand on the mahogany wood, his face turning red with sudden anger. "How dare you speak to my aunt that way?" he demanded, puffing his chest out. "You show some respect to your betters. You are nothing but a diversity hire desk jockey, and you should be grateful you are even allowed to sit at this table." As Trent shouted, he aggressively bumped the table, causing my small clutch purse to tip over. It fell off the edge, hitting the hardwood floor with a sharp thud. The clasp popped open, spilling a few of my belongings onto the polished wood. A tube of lipstick, a set of keys, and a heavy, solid bronze challenge coin. The coin rolled across the floor with a distinct metallic ringing sound, spinning in a tight circle, before finally coming to rest right near Harrison's expensive leather shoes. The room remained completely silent as Harrison looked down. The coin was not a standard military souvenir. It was a highly classified custom-minted insignia. The front displayed the silhouette of a stealth fighter jet, and the back bore the unmistakable crest of the Tactical Aviation Procurement Board, the most elite and secretive evaluation committee in the United States military. It was a coin only given to the highest-ranking commanders and test pilots, individuals who held the fate of billion-dollar defense contracts in their hands. Harrison, a man who had spent his entire career navigating the cutthroat world of defense contracting, knew exactly what that coin was. He had spent the last 6 months desperately trying to bribe, lobby, and schmooze his way into the good graces of the very committee that coin represented. I watched as the color completely drained from Harrison's face. His ruddy, confident complexion turned a sickly shade of gray. His eyes widened in absolute terror as he stared at the bronze medal resting against his shoe. He slowly lifted his head, his gaze traveling from the coin on the floor to my calm, unbothered face. The arrogant defense contractor looked as though he had just seen a ghost. His breathing grew shallow, and his hands began to shake so violently that his bourbon splashed over the rim of his glass. The rest of the family, sensing the sudden drastic shift in his demeanor, fell into a confused and anxious silence. Trent stopped his ranting, looking back and forth between his father and me, completely lost. Harrison ignored his son. He ignored his sister-in-law. He ignored the spilled wine. He leaned forward, his voice barely a terrified whisper, completely devoid of the arrogance he had displayed all evening. "Where did you get that coin?" Harrison asked, his voice cracking. I did not answer immediately. I let the silence hang, letting the weight of his realization crush him slowly. I calmly reached down, picked up the heavy bronze coin, and placed it on the table next to my plate. The metal gleamed under the crystal chandelier. "I earned it," I replied simply. Harrison swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. The defense contract his company needed to avoid total bankruptcy was entirely dependent on a single legendary pilot known only by a highly classified reputation. A pilot who flew combat missions in the Middle East, evaluated top-secret weapons systems, and held absolute authority over naval aviation purchases. Harrison looked at me, his eyes wide with a combination of dread and desperate realization. The man who had ignored my existence for a decade suddenly looked at me as if I held his life in my hands. "What is your call sign?" Harrison asked, the question hanging in the dead air of the dining room. Trent let out a scoffing laugh, trying to break the tension. "Dad, she does not have a call sign. She is just a poster girl." "Shut up!" Trent Harrison snapped, not breaking eye contact with me. "I asked you a question. What is your call sign?" I looked at him, feeling the absolute power of the moment. 10 years of insults, 10 years of being treated like garbage, 10 years of silent endurance all came down to this single second. I sat back in my chair, looked him dead in the eye, and spoke the word that would destroy their entire world. "Valkyrie." The room went dead silent. Trent's laughter shatters the absolute silence of the dining room. It is not a nervous laugh or a polite chuckle to ease the tension. It is a loud, obnoxious bark that bounces off the crystal chandeliers and the dark mahogany walls. He leans back in his heavy dining chair, wiping a tear of pure amusement from his eye, shaking his head, as if I have just told the most hilarious joke in the world. He points a finger across the table, directly at my face, his customized cufflink catching the light. "Valkyrie. You are claiming your call sign is Valkyrie." Trent slams his open palm on the table, making the expensive silverware rattle against the fine china. "That is the most pathetic delusional lie I have ever heard in my entire life. Do you even know who Valkyrie is, Megan?" I notice he switches back to calling me Megan, trying to diminish me, deliberately ignoring the name I just gave them. But I remain perfectly still. I do not break eye contact. I let him dig his own grave. Trent stands up from his chair. He paces behind his seat, adjusting the collar of his pristine white uniform, playing to his audience like a bad actor on a stage. "Valkyrie is an absolute legend in the tactical aviation community. She is the most decorated active female F-35C fighter pilot in the United States Navy. She flew highly classified combat sorties over hostile territory in the Middle East, while the rest of us were still sitting in training lectures. She has clearance levels that require presidential approval, and you expect us to believe that a 34-year-old woman who grew up in a rusted trailer park in Ohio is the Navy's top gun." He scoffs loudly, walking closer to my side of the table, his chest puffed out with unearned pride. "You have crossed a massive line here tonight. This is not just a pathetic cry for attention from a desperate housewife. This is a serious federal crime. Stolen valor is a punishable offense under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Claiming to be a combat veteran, claiming a highly classified call sign just to impress your wealthy in-laws at a dinner party. It is beyond pathetic. I should call the military police right now and have you dragged off this estate in handcuffs." He reaches into his pocket and pulls out his smartphone, holding it up like a weapon aimed at my head. "I am an active duty lieutenant. I have a sworn duty to report fraudulent claims of military service. Do you want to confess your lie right now, or do you want to spend the rest of the night sitting in a federal holding cell?" "Trent, please put the phone down," Colin says. His voice is painfully quiet, lacking any real authority or conviction. He shifts in his chair, looking everywhere except at me. She is just confused. Maybe she misunderstood a project she was working on at the base. Let us just calm down, drop the subject, and finish eating dinner. My husband's defense is almost worse than Trent's accusation. Colin does not believe me either. After 10 years of marriage, he still views me entirely through the toxic lens his mother crafted for him. To Colin, I am a fragile, uneducated girl who needs protection from her own supposed incompetence. He reaches over to touch my arm, silently, urging me to apologize and drop the act to keep the peace. I pull my arm away from his grasp immediately. Beatrice slams her crystal wineglass onto the table. The sharp crack of glass against wood echoes like a gunshot through the room. "Control your delusional wife before she ruins Harrison's career," she snaps at Colin, her face contorted with unchecked rage. "I told you this would happen. I told you 10 years ago when you insisted on marrying her. I said she would drag our prestigious family name through the mud. Look at her, making up ridiculous action movie fantasies at a formal dinner because she cannot handle being the least important person in the room." Beatrice stands up rapidly, her expensive silk dress rustling in the tense silence. She points a manicured finger directly at my face. "You have embarrassed my son for the absolute last time. You sit at my table eating the gourmet food my money paid for, and you dare to mock my nephew's dedicated military service with your childish lies. You are a fraud. You have always been a fraud. I knew it the day you showed up to my house wearing discount shoes. The only reason you even have a job on that naval base is because Colin's father made a few discreet calls to get you a low-level administrative position. You are nothing but a diversity hire pushing papers around a desk, and now you are risking Harrison's federal contracts with this stolen valor nonsense." She looks at Colin, her voice dropping to a dangerous, demanding tone that she has used to control him his entire life. "You will take her home right now. You will force her to pack her cheap bags, and you will file for divorce by Monday morning. I will not allow this pathological liar to jeopardize our standing in the defense community for one more second." Trent smirks, feeling emboldened by Beatrice's vicious attack. "You heard her. Get out, or I make the call to the base commander. I know the base commander personally. I play golf with his executive officer every other weekend. I can end your miserable little career with one phone call." Harrison remains completely silent at the head of the table. His eyes never leave the bronze challenge coin resting on the floor near his shoe. Unlike Trent, Harrison is a man who truly understands power. He understands the subtle, dangerous signs of true authority. He is watching my posture, my steady breathing, the absolute lack of fear in my eyes. While his arrogant son throws a temper tantrum and his sister-in-law screams about social standing, Harrison is doing the math in his head. He remembers the quiet industry rumors about the ruthless, untouchable commander heading the new procurement board. Trent steps right up to my chair, invading my personal space to intimidate me. He leans down, his face inches from mine, his breath smelling of expensive bourbon and unchecked arrogance. "Are you deaf? I said get out. You do not belong in a military uniform, and you certainly do not belong in this house." I do not flinch. I do not raise my voice. I move with the slow, deliberate precision of a fighter pilot running a pre-flight checklist before a combat drop. I reach into the inner pocket of my dress uniform jacket. My movements are so calm and measured that Trent actually takes a half step back, suddenly unsure of himself. I pull out a solid blue military identification card. It is not the standard issue green card given to civilian contractors or administrative staff. It bears the distinct holographic seals, the embedded security chips, and the specific clearance markers of high naval command. I do not hand it to Trent. I toss it casually onto the center of the mahogany table. It lands with a soft smack right next to the floral centerpiece, perfectly illuminated by the bright chandelier above. Trent looks down at it. His mocking smile freezes completely. The blood drains from his face so fast he looks physically ill. He stares at the bold black lettering printed across the top of the card. He reads the rank. He reads the name. Commander Kira Bennett, pay grade 05. Trent is an 03. He is a junior officer who has spent his entire short career managing supply manifests and ordering spare parts for cargo ships from a comfortable desk. He has never seen combat. He has never commanded a squadron. He has never flown a jet. And he has just spent the last 10 minutes aggressively threatening, insulting, and mocking an active duty commander who significantly outranks him in every possible military metric. In the military, insubordination to a superior commissioned officer is a career-ending offense. Doing it aggressively in front of civilian witnesses is professional suicide. Trent's mouth opens and closes, but no sound comes out. His arrogant posture deflates instantly like a punctured balloon. His shoulders slump and he takes a sudden, frantic step backward, bumping hard into his own dining chair. He looks at me, his eyes wide with sheer panic and sudden understanding. He instinctively snaps his feet together and stands at the rigid position of attention, a deeply ingrained military reflex taking over his paralyzed brain. "Commander!" Trent stammers, his voice barely a squeak, completely stripped of his previous bravado. "I apologize. I did not realize. I was not informed of your rank or your billet." "You were not informed because my rank is none of your business, Lieutenant." I say, my voice cold and hard as steel, echoing clearly in the silent room. "But since you are so incredibly eager to discuss military regulations tonight, let us discuss Article 89 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Disrespect toward a superior commissioned officer. I suggest you sit down and keep your mouth completely shut for the rest of the evening, or I will ensure your commanding officer receives a full detailed report of your conduct by 0800 hours tomorrow morning." Trent drops into his chair like a puppet with cut strings. He stares down at his empty plate, trembling visibly, completely humiliated and terrified for his career. Colin looks at the ID card on the table, his jaw hanging open in pure shock. "Kira," he whispers, his voice trembling. "You told me you were a logistics coordinator. You told me you just handled flight scheduling." "I handle tactical airstrike scheduling for combat squadrons," I reply without turning to look at him. "I told you exactly what my security clearance allowed me to tell you." Beatrice is still standing, but her furious momentum has completely evaporated. She looks at her terrified son, then at a shaking Trent, entirely unable to comprehend why the two men in her family are suddenly acting terrified of the woman she has treated like garbage for a decade. She opens her mouth to speak, to hurl another toxic insult to regain control of the room, but Harrison cuts her off sharply. "Sit down, Beatrice," Harrison says. His voice is not loud, but it carries a dark, intense weight that commands instant obedience from everyone in his family. Beatrice slowly sinks back into her chair, her eyes darting nervously around the room, realizing the power dynamic has fundamentally shifted. Harrison ignores everyone else at the table. He does not care that his son was just publicly humiliated. He does not care about Beatrice's wounded pride or Colin's utter confusion. He leans heavily on the mahogany table, his eyes locked onto my face. The sheer greed radiating from him is palpable in the air. The initial shock has worn off, replaced entirely by a predatory, calculating hunger. He points a slightly shaking finger at the bronze challenge coin on the floor and then points directly at my military ID resting on the table. "You are the head of the Tactical Aviation Procurement Board," Harrison whispers, his voice thick with sudden reverence and unadulterated greed. Harrison's words hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. The absolute terror in his eyes slowly morphs into something far more dangerous. The hostility that had defined this entire evening evaporates in a fraction of a second, replaced by a toxic, sugary sweetness that makes my skin crawl. He stands up straight, smoothing the lapels of his expensive tailored suit, and completely ignores the fact that his son is practically hyperventilating in the chair next to him. Harrison waves a dismissive hand at Trent, signaling him to remain quiet. And then he looks at me. His face stretches into a wide, artificial smile that does not reach his cold, calculating eyes. He walks slowly around the massive mahogany dining table, his leather shoes silent on the thick Persian rug, until he is standing directly beside my chair. He reaches out and gently pours a fresh glass of sparkling water from a crystal pitcher, setting it delicately in front of me as if I am suddenly the most honored guest in his home. It is a masterful, sickening pivot. "Kira, my dear," Harrison says, his voice dripping with sudden unearned affection. "You have certainly kept us in the dark. A commander, and not just any commander, but the head of the Tactical Aviation Procurement Board. I must admit I am incredibly impressed. You have played your cards very close to your chest, but I suppose that level of discretion is exactly what makes you so brilliant at your job. I do not touch the water. I keep my hands resting calmly on the table, watching him circle me like a shark, realizing the bait is actually a lifeline. Colin stares at his father, utterly bewildered by the sudden change in tone. For a decade, Harrison has barely acknowledged my presence, often referring to me simply as Colin's wife, rather than using my actual name. Now he is practically bowing at my feet. The sheer hypocrisy of the moment is staggering, but I know exactly what is driving it. Desperation. Harrison pulls up an empty chair, dragging it close to mine so he can sit beside me, invading my personal space with his overwhelming cologne and desperate energy. He leans in, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, as if we are old friends sharing a profitable secret. Family is the most important thing in this world, Kira. He begins, his eyes wide and pleading. We may have had our misunderstandings in the past, but at the end of the day we are blood. We protect our own, and right now the family needs your protection. I am going to be completely honest with you, because I know you are a woman who appreciates the hard truth. He takes a deep breath, looking around the room before locking his gaze back onto mine. Apex Defense Solutions is bleeding out. We have had 3 major manufacturing setbacks this quarter, and our stock is plummeting. We are on the absolute verge of bankruptcy. If we do not secure a massive influx of capital by the end of the fiscal year, I will have to liquidate everything. The estate that trusts all of it. Colin's inheritance will be completely wiped out. The entire family legacy will be destroyed. He pauses, letting the weight of his financial ruin settle over the table. Beatrice pales, clutching her napkin tightly, clearly aware of the financial strain, but perhaps not the sheer magnitude of their impending collapse. But there is a solution, Harrison continues, his voice quickening with frantic hope. The Project Sentinel software contract. $50 million. It is the exact lifeline my company needs to survive. I know for a fact that your procurement board is reviewing the final bids this week. I know you have the ultimate authority to make the final recommendation to the Pentagon. Our software prototype is good, Kira. It is solid, but the competition is fierce and we need a guaranteed win. He reaches out, attempting to place his hand over mine, but I smoothly pull my hand back, resting it in my lap. Harrison ignores the rejection, too blinded by his own greed to care. I need you to push my bid to the top of the pile, he demands, his tone shifting from a plea to an expectation. I need you to bypass the standard evaluation protocols and personally guarantee that Apex Defense Solutions wins that $50 million contract. You can easily justify it. You can say our encryption protocols are superior. You can say our integration timeline is faster. You have the power to make this happen, Kira. Do it for the family. We need this. I stare at him, feeling a deep, profound sense of disgust. After years of mocking my background, after treating me like an uneducated burden, the moment he discovers I hold actual power, he immediately expects me to corrupt myself to save his failing empire. He expects me to compromise the safety of naval aviators by pushing through unverified software just to pad his bank account. No, I say. The word is short, sharp, and final. Harrison blinks, clearly taken aback. He chuckles nervously, as if he simply misheard me. Kira, I do not think you understand the severity of the situation. If I go down, the family goes down. Colin loses his trust fund. You lose your safety net. I understand the situation perfectly, Harrison, I reply, my voice completely devoid of emotion. You ran your company into the ground, and now you want me to commit federal procurement fraud to bail you out. The answer is absolutely not. My integrity is not a bargaining chip for your financial failures. I will not compromise the safety of my pilots for your bottom line. Your bid will be evaluated exactly like every other bid. If your software is not the best, you will not get the contract. Point blank. The toxic sweetness vanishes from Harrison's face, replaced by a dark, simmering rage. But before he can speak, Beatrice absolutely loses her mind. The polite, high society facade shatters completely. She slams both of her hands flat onto the mahogany table. The impact rattles the fine china and sends a crystal wine glass tipping over, spilling dark red wine across the pristine white tablecloth like a spreading stain of blood. She stands up her chair, screeching harshly against the floorboards. Her face is twisted with a kind of primal ugly fury that I have never seen from her before. "How dare you!" Beatrice screams, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "How absolutely dare you sit in my house and refuse to help us? We paid for your husband's entire life. We bought the car you drive. We paid for the down payment on the house you live in. We tolerated your pathetic working-class presence in our home for 10 years. You were nothing but trailer park trash when Colin found you, and we elevated you. We gave you a name that actually means something in this city. You owe us this." She marches around this table, her eyes blazing with irrational fury. Colin stands up, holding his hands out weakly. "Mom, please calm down. Let us just talk about this rationally." "Stay out of this, Colin," Beatrice snaps, shoving his arm away. She steps right up to my chair. She is breathing heavily, her chest heaving with rage. She looks at me as if I am an insect that she wants to crush beneath her heel. "I gave you everything," she hisses. "I welcomed you into this family, and this is how you repay my generosity, by letting us lose everything because of your stubborn, misguided sense of morality." Before I can react, Beatrice reaches out with lightning speed. Her fingers dig into my neck, her sharp nails scratching my skin as she grabs the heavy diamond necklace she forced me to wear tonight. It was the necklace she gifted me on my wedding day, a piece she constantly reminded me was worth more than my parents' entire house. She grabs the cold stones and violently yanks. The delicate platinum chain snaps instantly. The clasp breaks with a sharp metallic pop. Several small diamonds pop loose from their settings, clattering onto the floor and scattering across the table. She holds the broken necklace in her fist, her knuckles white, panting with exertion. The physical assault proves everything I ever needed to know. Her love, her acceptance, her gifts, they were all conditional. They were transactions designed to purchase my obedience, and the second I refused to comply, she violently took back her investment. I do not raise a hand to my scratched neck. I do not shout or react to the pain. I remain seated, completely composed, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. I look up at her furious face with absolute pity. "You did not buy my loyalty, Beatrice," I say calmly. "And military contracts are not family favors. I am a commander in the United States Navy. I took an oath to protect this country, not to act as a personal slush fund for corrupt defense contractors. You can keep the diamonds. They always felt cheap anyway." Beatrice gasps, clutching the broken necklace to her chest as if I have physically struck her. She steps back, her eyes wide with shock at my total lack of submission. Harrison moves in, stepping directly in front of his wife. He leans down, resting his knuckles on the table, bringing his face dangerously close to mine. His eyes are dead, entirely devoid of any familial connection. He is no longer playing the desperate father. He is playing the ruthless corporate predator who destroys anyone who stands in his way. The silence in the room is suffocating, broken only by the sound of Trent's nervous breathing and the distant ticking of a grandfather clock in the hallway. Harrison's jaw clenches. He speaks in a low, gravelly whisper, pushing every word out with deliberate, venomous intent. "You think you hold all the cards because you have a shiny badge and a fancy title?" Harrison says, his breath hot against my face. "But you have no idea how the real world works, Kira. You have no idea the kind of people I know, the strings I can pull, and the political capital I possess. I do not ask for favors, I dictate terms, and right now I am dictating your future." He points a single steady finger right between my eyes. His threat is not empty. It is calculated, precise, and entirely deadly. "You either approve my bid by Friday," Harrison whispers, his voice dropping to a terrifying absolute promise, "or I guarantee you will be court-martialed by Monday." I push my chair back. The scraping of the wood against the floor shatters the tense silence that follows Harrison's threat. I do not offer a polite farewell. I do not glance at Beatrice, who is still clutching the broken diamond necklace like a lifeline. I walk straight out of the dining room, my heels clicking sharply against the marble foyer, leaving the ruins of their 40th anniversary dinner behind me. Colin scrambles out of his chair and chases after me, stammering apologies to his parents over his shoulder. The heavy, imposing oak front door slams shut behind us, completely cutting off the suffocating, toxic atmosphere of the massive mansion. The cool, crisp night air hits my flushed face, but it does nothing to extinguish the fire burning in my chest. Colin quickly unlocks the luxury car in absolute total silence. We get in, and the moment the doors seal us inside, the argument explodes. It is not a quiet, simmering disagreement. It is a blazing, visceral confrontation that has been brewing for 10 years. Colin grips the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He refuses to start the engine. He turns to me, his face pale in the dim streetlights, his voice laced with the desperate, conditioned panic of a man who has spent his entire life bowing to his parents' demands. He begs me to reconsider. He pleads with me to just take a look at the bid, to bend the rules just this once to keep the peace. He tells me that Harrison is a powerful man, that he can ruin us, that the trust fund is the only thing keeping our future secure. He actually uses the phrase family loyalty, parroting the exact toxic manipulation his mother has used to control him since childhood. I look at the man I married, feeling a profound, chilling detachment. I draw a hard line right there in the passenger seat. I tell him my integrity is not for sale. I remind him that I am a naval officer who has sworn an oath to the Constitution, not to Harrison's failing bank account. I explain using small, clear words that pushing a subpar software contract through the procurement board means putting pilots in danger. It means risking lives to pay for Beatrice's country club memberships. I ask him if he really expects me to trade American lives so his father can buy a third vacation home. Colin stares at me completely, unable to comprehend a worldview where duty outranks money. He argues that it is just software, that everyone cuts corners, that I am being unnecessarily rigid, and destroying our marriage over pride. He starts the car with a violent twist of the key. The drive home is entirely silent. The silence of a marriage fracturing beyond repair. The next morning I wake up long before the dawn. Colin is heavily sleeping in the spare guest room, a stark physical manifestation of the massive chasm between us. I slowly put on my working uniform, brew a strong cup of black coffee, and leave the house before the sun even breaches the horizon. I need the structure of the naval base. I need the rigid, unyielding reality of my command to wash away the toxic residue of my husband's family. I drive through the quiet streets of Virginia, mentally preparing for the upcoming board meeting where we will officially reject Apex Defense Solutions' bid. I arrive at the main gate of the naval base exactly at 0600. The Marine Guard approaches my vehicle, recognizing my car. I hand him my military identification. He swipes it through the scanner. Instead of the familiar green light and a crisp salute, the machine blares a sharp red warning tone. The Marine frowns, swiping the card a second time. The result is the same. He steps back, his hand resting instinctively near his sidearm, and asks me to step out of the vehicle. Within 5 minutes, I am sitting in a sterile, windowless room inside the base security office. 2 agents from the Naval Criminal Investigative Service enter the room. They do not offer me coffee. They do not smile. They place a thin manila folder on the metal table between us. The lead agent, a man with tired eyes and a perfectly pressed suit, informs me that my security clearance has been temporarily suspended, effective midnight last night. I sit perfectly still, processing the information. A suspended clearance means I cannot access my office. I cannot read my emails. I cannot participate in the Tactical Aviation Procurement Board. I am effectively grounded, cut off from my command. I ask for the grounds of the suspension. The agent opens the folder and reads from a prepared statement. An anonymous tip was filed with the Inspector General during the early hours of the morning. The tip alleges that I have been accepting massive, untraceable bribes from rival defense contractors. The accusation claims I have been deliberately burying Apex Defense Solutions bids in exchange for offshore kickbacks from their competitors. The speed and the sheer audacity of the move are staggering. Harrison did not just make an empty threat at the dinner table. He went home and immediately triggered a federal investigation against me. He used his political connections to fast-track the suspension of a commanding officer. He knows that an inspector general investigation can take months to resolve. He knows that while I am suspended, my deputy will take over the procurement board. My deputy is a man who owes his career to a politician currently funded by Harrison's Super Political Action Committee. The trap has been sprung with terrifying efficiency. The NCIS agents inform me that I am to return home. I am not allowed to contact any military personnel. I am not allowed to discuss the procurement board. I am officially under active investigation. They escort me back to my vehicle like a dangerous criminal. As I slowly walk across the vast asphalt parking lot, the morning sun finally rising, I feel the heavy, oppressive weight of Harrison's power. He truly and completely believes he has definitively won this war. He falsely believes he has permanently neutralized the only obstacle standing between his failing company and $50 million of taxpayer money. I slowly unlock my car door and carefully slide into the leather driver's seat. The powerful engine hums to life, but I absolutely do not immediately put the vehicle in drive. I sit in the quiet, complete isolation of the dark cabin, staring blankly at the imposing security gates I am no longer allowed to pass through. My entire career, everything I have built with my own hands, is suddenly hanging by a single frayed thread. My cell phone buzzes in my pocket. A sharp, singular vibration. I pull the device out. The screen illuminates, showing a new text message. The sender is Trent. I open the message, my eyes scanning the glowing text. It is short, arrogant, and dripping with the same toxic entitlement his father displayed last night. The message reads, "Dad has friends in high places. Sign the paperwork, Valkyrie, or enjoy military prison." I read the words again. I let the sheer stupidity of the message wash over me. I do not feel panic. I do not feel fear. Slowly, a genuine, terrifying smile spreads across my face. Trent and Harrison think they are dealing with a scared little girl from a trailer park. They think I am a victim who will fold under the immense pressure of their wealth and political connections. They believe they have brilliantly executed a flawless pressure campaign to secure their software contract. But they are arrogant, and their arrogance has just blinded them to a catastrophic, monumental error. Trent did not just send a nasty message to his cousin's wife. He used a commercial cellular network to send a direct written threat to an active-duty commander in the United States Navy. He explicitly stated that his father orchestrated a fraudulent Inspector General investigation. He demanded that I sign official Department of Defense procurement paperwork under the direct threat of imprisonment. They just committed federal blackmail. They documented their own conspiracy to defraud the United States government, and they transmitted that unclassified confession directly to my phone. They did not just hand me a piece of the puzzle. They handed me the entire loaded weapon. I lock the screen of my phone. I take a deep, centering breath. The Inspector General thinks they are investigating a corrupt pilot. NCIS thinks they are dealing with a compromised officer. They have no idea that they are about to unravel the largest defense contracting fraud ring on the eastern seaboard. I put the car in drive and steer away from the naval base. I am going home, but I am not retreating. The battle has just begun, and the wealthy elite of Washington are about to learn exactly why they call me Valkyrie. I do not reply to Trent's text message. Engaging with a blackmailer only provides them with the dangerous illusion of control. Instead, I place my phone face down on the passenger seat and slowly pull my vehicle out of the naval base parking lot. My temporary suspension means I have unexpected time on my hands, time I intend to use with absolute, calculated precision. I drive exactly 2 miles down the coastal road to a small, unassuming coffee shop, frequently patronized by naval personnel and local shipyard workers. The rich scent of roasted coffee beans and the faint, lingering smell of the salty ocean air provide a deeply comforting contrast to the sterile, intensely hostile environment of the base security office I just left. I order a plain black coffee, take a seat in a secluded, dimly lit corner booth facing the main entrance, and quietly open my personal laptop. I need to properly document every single interaction, every thinly veiled threat, And every piece of digital evidence before Harrison and his deeply corrupt family realized the magnitude of their colossal misstep. The morning crowd is loud, a sea of camouflage uniforms and heavy work boots providing the perfect cover of anonymity. I sip my coffee, my mind racing through the complex web of federal procurement laws, mapping out exactly how I will dismantle Apex Defense Solutions piece by piece. 30 minutes later, the brass bell hanging above the heavy glass cafe door chimes sharply. I do not look up immediately, perfectly accustomed to the constant rotating flow of tired sailors and local defense contractors. But the sharp, aggressive, and highly rhythmic clicking of expensive designer heels against the scuffed, coffee-stained linoleum floor instantly catches my attention. It is a distinct, aggressive sound that absolutely does not belong in a working-class coffee shop at 7:30 in the morning. I slowly raise my eyes from my laptop screen. Beatrice is standing at the very edge of my booth. She looks entirely alien in this environment, draped in an immaculately tailored, pristine white Chanel suit with a perfectly coiffed blowout that likely took hours to achieve. She is tightly clutching a dark, authentic crocodile skin handbag against her side like a shield. Her cold, judgmental eyes sweep the modest cafe with undisguised, profound revulsion, her nose crinkling slightly at the smell of burnt toast, before her gaze finally locks directly onto me. She does not ask for permission to sit. She simply slides into the cracked vinyl booth opposite me, gracefully crossing her legs and immediately placing a thick, heavy manila envelope onto the slightly sticky table between us. I close my laptop, slowly maintaining perfect, unbothered eye contact. You are a very long way from the manicured lawns of your country club, Beatrice. I am surprised you even know how to navigate this part of town without a chauffeur. She completely ignores my comment, keeping her posture perfectly rigid and her expression frozen in a mask of total disdain. She taps the center of the manila envelope with one perfectly manicured crimson fingernail. The top flap of the envelope is unsealed, and because of the angle, I can clearly see the thick, tightly bound stacks of crisp $100 bills banded together inside. The sheer volume of paper creates a distinct heavy bulge in the center of the brown paper. There is exactly $100,000 in untraceable cash resting right there. Beatrice says, her voice low, steady, and completely devoid of any human emotion. Consider this an early inheritance from the family trust. Consider it a sincere apology for any harsh words spoken last night. Take the envelope, buy yourself something beautiful, and just sign Harrison's approval for the software contract. It is a very simple, mutually beneficial transaction. I stare at the money, feeling a deep rising tide of physical revulsion. They truly believe that absolutely everyone in the world has a price. They genuinely believe my personal integrity, my highly decorated military career, and my solemn oath to the United States Navy can be casually bought for the price of a luxury sports car. You suspended my security clearance, I state, keeping my voice perfectly level and entirely calm. You deliberately orchestrated a fraudulent Inspector General investigation to cripple my command, and now you are sitting in a highly public coffee shop trying to actively bribe a federal military officer. Are you completely out of your mind, Beatrice? Beatrice leans forward aggressively, her eyes narrowing into venomous, calculating slits. Do not dare play the righteous, morally superior soldier with me, Kira. We know exactly who and what you are. You are a desperate girl from a dirt-poor, rusted-out town who intentionally married my son to climb the social ladder. You have spent 10 years desperately pretending you belong in our world, playing dress-up in our home. Well, here is your opportunity to actually earn your place at our table. Take the money, push the software contract through your little procurement committee, keep Harrison's company completely afloat, and the anonymous tip to the Inspector General permanently vanishes by tomorrow morning. Your clearance is restored, and you go back to playing commander. I do not touch the envelope. I do not even look at the cash again. I look at her with absolute unwavering disgust. I am not taking a single cent of your corrupt blood money, Beatrice, and I am certainly not going to intentionally compromise the safety of American naval aviators to save your husband's failing, mismanaged business. Beatrice's carefully maintained face instantly flushes with sudden, unrestrained, ugly anger. She slams her palm flat against the tabletop, making my coffee cup rattle dangerously, completely uncaring if the nearby sailors hear her outburst. "You arrogant, ungrateful, miserable little brat!" she hisses, the polished society facade shattering into a million pieces. "You actually think you hold the power here because you have a fancy title and a uniform? You have absolutely nothing. We own everything. We own the very house you live in. We pay for the luxurious lifestyle you currently enjoy. And if you refuse this incredibly generous offer right now, I will personally guarantee that Colin is immediately stripped of every single financial asset he possesses." She points a shaking, furious finger directly at my face, her eyes wide with manic determination. "I will disinherit him entirely. I will completely freeze his trust funds. I will rapidly liquidate the lucrative investment accounts we set up in his name. I will force my son to make a permanent choice between the immense wealth power and comfort of his family and his stubborn, uneducated trailer park wife. And let me tell you a brutal truth, Kira. When the money completely dries up, when the elite country club memberships are suddenly canceled, and when he realizes he has to actually struggle for the very first time in his pampered life, he will deeply and permanently resent you. He will hate you for taking away his bright future just to protect your own fragile, pathetic ego. Her threat is not an idle bluff. She is intentionally weaponizing her own son cruelly, using his lifelong financial dependency as a blunt instrument to force my total compliance. She desperately expects me to panic. She assumes I will quickly grab the cash to save my deteriorating marriage and protect my comfortable lifestyle. I look at the bulging envelope, taking a moment to process the sheer audacity of her actions, then look back up at her furious, expectant, highly arrogant face. "Colin is a grown adult," I say, my voice steady, resonant, and deeply resolute. "If he ultimately chooses your toxic, manipulative money over his own wife, then he is absolutely not the man I thought I married. But I am not going to willingly commit federal treason to save a fragile marriage built on a decaying foundation of your constant financial blackmail." I place my hand firmly on top of the manila envelope and slowly, deliberately slide it back across the sticky table. It bumps heavily against Beatrice's crocodile skin handbag. "Take your dirty cash and leave immediately," I tell her, my tone dropping to a dangerous, uncompromising warning. "You are crossing a massive, irreversible legal line, Beatrice. Attempting to explicitly bribe a military officer is a severe federal offense. Blackmailing a commanding officer is a severe federal offense. If you walk out that door and intentionally leave this money sitting here, you are committing a major felony that carries a mandatory federal prison sentence. You are not untouchable, and you are not above the law." Beatrice scoffs loudly, a harsh, grating sound of absolute, supreme confidence. She aggressively grabs the envelope and shoves it roughly down into her designer bag, completely and entirely unfazed by my clear warning. She looks down at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated, blinding arrogance. "You still do not fully get it, do you?" Beatrice sneers smoothly, sliding out of the vinyl booth and standing tall over me. "You honestly think your little military rules apply to powerful people like us? You actually think the Inspector General is going to listen to a nobody from Ohio? We regularly play golf with the elite politicians who directly fund your base. We frequently dine with the high-ranking admirals who write your annual performance reviews. We own the people investigating you, Kira. They work directly for us. You are completely alone and you have already lost." She sharply adjusts the elegant collar of her expensive jacket, her face set in a highly victorious, deeply cruel sneer. "Enjoy the sudden end of your pathetic career, Commander. You brought this disaster entirely upon yourself." She turns swiftly on her heel and marches directly out of the coffee shop, the brass bell chiming brightly as she exits into the morning air. I quietly watch through the large plate glass window as she quickly climbs into the back of a waiting black town car. The luxury vehicle smoothly pulls away from the curb, merging seamlessly into the morning traffic and disappearing down the busy street. I sit completely alone in the booth for exactly 10 seconds. I take a very slow, highly controlled deep breath, letting the rushing adrenaline process naturally through my system. Beatrice genuinely thinks she has just delivered the final crushing career-ending blow. She truly thinks she has isolated me, terrified me, and completely outmaneuvered me on every single front. I slowly lift my left arm and rest my wrist casually on the edge of the table. I lightly tap the digital face of my smartwatch twice. The tiny glowing red recording icon on the small digital screen blinks once and instantly disappears. The hidden audio recording software completely stops safely and securely uploading the 30-minute file directly into my heavily encrypted military-grade cloud storage account. Every single arrogant word she just said, every clear, undeniable threat, every explicit admission of the fake Inspector General investigation, every specific mention of the $100,000 cash bribe, all perfectly and flawlessly captured in crystal-clear high-definition audio. I calmly pull my cell phone from my jacket pocket and open my secure contacts list. I rapidly scroll past Colin's name. I smoothly scroll past the base commander's office. I stop immediately on a specific direct number given to me years ago during a highly classified intensive briefing regarding strict anti-corruption protocols. I press dial and bring the phone to my ear. Naval Criminal Investigative Service Major Case Response Team. A sharp professional voice answers promptly on the second ring. This is Commander Kira Bennett, head of the Tactical Aviation Procurement Board. I say, my voice steady, completely cold, and entirely focused. I need to urgently report an active, ongoing, highly coordinated conspiracy to defraud the Department of Defense, accompanied by attempted bribery and severe federal blackmail. I have the physical evidence and I have the audio confessions. I need to speak with your lead investigative agent immediately. I am sitting in a secure, soundproof briefing room on the fourth floor of the federal building in Alexandria. The sterile white walls, the harsh fluorescent lighting overhead, and the absolute absence of windows provide a stark, jarring contrast to the opulent arrogance I just witnessed at the coffee shop. Across the heavy metal table sits Special Agent Vance, the head of the Naval Criminal Investigative Service Major Case Response Team, along with a senior representative from the Department of Defense, Inspector General's office. They have just finished listening to the unedited audio file I transmitted from my encrypted smartwatch. The room is thick with a heavy, deeply professional silence. Vance presses a button on his rugged laptop, permanently stopping the playback of Beatrice's shrill, threatening voice. He looks up at me, his expression grave, calculating, and intensely focused. He does not treat me like a suspect or a compromised officer. He treats me like a high-value asset. Vance leans forward, clasping his hands on the table, and outlines the brutal reality of the situation. He explains that my audio recording is the exact, undeniable breakthrough they have been waiting for. Apex Defense Solutions has been under intensive federal scrutiny for 18 months. They strongly suspect that Harrison is the central linchpin of a massive, deeply entrenched corruption ring that stretches across multiple naval bases, procurement boards, and private defense contractors. Harrison has been incredibly careful, constantly insulating himself by using junior executives' untraceable shell companies and layers of plausible deniability to facilitate his bribes. They had absolutely no direct, actionable evidence tying him to the extortion of military personnel until Beatrice confidently walked into a public cafe, laid $100,000 in cash on a table, and openly boasted about their criminal connections to high-ranking officials. My audio recording is the smoking gun that blows their entire defense apart. But Vance tells me it is not enough to just arrest Beatrice for attempted bribery. They need the entire corrupt network. They need Harrison to explicitly incriminate himself on monitored federal channels. Vance looks me dead in the eye and asks me to act as their primary bait. He needs me to return to my home and my command and pretend that the blackmail has successfully broken my resolve. I must convince Harrison and his deeply arrogant family that I am utterly terrified of their political power, that I am willing to completely sacrifice my military integrity to save my husband's trust fund. I have to formally approve the preliminary stages of the Project Sentinel bid, actively pulling Harrison deep into the trap so the FBI and NCIS can trace the subsequent kickback funds directly to his primary accounts. It is an incredibly dangerous, highly volatile shadow operation. If Harrison suspects for a single second that I am working directly with federal agents, he will instantly liquidate his domestic assets, shred the digital evidence, and likely flee the country, leaving the corruption ring entirely intact. I do not hesitate. I agree to the operation immediately. I am fully ready to burn his empire to the ground. I drive back to our house in the affluent Virginia suburbs, the immense weight of the shadow operation sitting heavily on my shoulders. When I walk through the heavy oak front door, the atmosphere inside is utterly chaotic. Colin is frantically pacing the length of our spacious living room, his face pale and slick with a cold, panicked sweat. He is clutching a stack of premium credit cards in one hand and his cell phone in the other. He looks completely unhinged. The moment he sees me enter the foyer, he practically sprints across the hardwood floor, his voice cracking with pure, unrestrained desperation. He tells me that his primary black card was just declined at a business lunch with his partners. He immediately logged into his private financial portal and discovered that every single account tied to the family trust has been frozen solid. The digital numbers he has relied on for his entire existence, the safety net that has shielded him from every consequence he has ever faced, have suddenly vanished. Harrison is making good on his vicious threat, executing a rapid, ruthless financial freeze to intentionally starve his own son into total submission. Colin is spiraling into a severe panic attack. He has never had to budget, save, or worry about money a single day in his pampered life. The sudden violent severing of his financial lifeline is fundamentally breaking his mind. He grabs my arm, demanding to know exactly what I did to make his father so incredibly angry. He begs me to call Harrison and offer a complete apology. He pleads with me to just give them whatever they want, so the money will be released back into his accounts. I look at my husband, the man who stood at an altar and promised to stand by me through everything, and I see absolutely nothing but a terrified child throwing a temper tantrum over a canceled allowance. I cannot tell him the truth. I am strictly forbidden from revealing the NCIS sting operation to anyone, especially a man so clearly compromised by his desperate addiction to his family's wealth. I firmly pull my arm away from his frantic grip. I tell him that I simply refuse to be bribed and that his parents are reacting like the criminals they truly are. Colin shouts that I am actively destroying our lives over my stubborn, misplaced pride. He accuses me of being inherently selfish, of secretly hating his family, because I was born poor, of deliberately sabotaging his secure future. He tells me that my military career means absolutely nothing compared to the powerful legacy of the family name. Every single word he spits at me permanently shatters another piece of our rapidly decaying marriage. He is willingly choosing their toxic money over my fundamental integrity, proving that Beatrice was entirely correct in her assessment of her own son. Before I can respond to his pathetic screaming outburst, the front door violently swings open. Colin was in such a panic that he forgot to lock it. Felicity, Colin's younger sister, storms into our living room like a perfectly manicured hurricane. She is tightly clutching a designer handbag, her face twisted into an ugly, venomous scowl that perfectly mirrors her mother's rage. Felicity has always treated me like an amusing, slightly distasteful charity case. She is a woman who spends her days organizing high society charity galas, and her nights spending money she never earned. Right now, she is absolutely furious, her eyes burning with an intense, unbridled hostility. She completely ignores Colin's frantic pacing and marches directly up to me, aggressively invading my personal space. She points a sharp, manicured finger right at my chest, her voice echoing shrilly against the vaulted ceilings of our home. She demands to know what kind of deranged, suicidal game I think I am playing. She screams that her father is currently tearing the family corporate accounts apart, moving assets, and aggressively freezing trusts, all because I had the absolute audacity to disrespect my social betters. Felicity tells me that my pathetic little ego trip is rapidly destroying the family's carefully managed finances. She claims that she had to abruptly cancel a luxury vacation to St. Bart's this morning because her private travel concierge informed her that the primary credit lines were locked. She says this as if it is a profound, life-altering tragedy that demands my immediate sympathy. Felicity steps even closer, her eyes blazing with unchecked generational entitlement. She tells me that I am nothing but a gold-digging fraud who struck the absolute lottery by manipulating her highly gullible brother. She claims that the family has graciously and silently tolerated my presence for a decade, enduring my distinct lack of pedigree and my embarrassing military job entirely for Colin's sake. Now she says my stubborn trailer park mentality is actually costing them real substantial money. She demands that I immediately drive to her father's downtown corporate office, get down on my hands and knees, and sign the Project Sentinel software approval. She threatens that if I do not fully comply by the end of the day, the family will hire the most ruthless, aggressive divorce attorneys on the Eastern Seaboard. They will ensure I leave this marriage with absolutely nothing, dragging my professional reputation through the mud until I am forced to resign my naval commission in total disgrace. She sneers that I will be back to flipping burgers in a rusty Ohio diner before the month is over. Colin stands silently in the background. He does not step forward to defend me. He does not tell his sister to lower her voice or leave our home. He simply watches his cowardice and silence serving as a complete and total endorsement of her vicious, unhinged attack. The betrayal is absolute, a cold blade sliding right between my ribs, but I cannot react with the fiery, righteous anger currently burning in my chest. I have to play the specific role Vance gave me. I have to be the broken, terrified, compliant woman they fully expect me to be. I force my shoulders to physically slump, releasing the rigid military posture I have maintained for years. I let my expression crumble into a highly convincing mask of defeated exhaustion. I look down at the hardwood floor, deliberately avoiding Felicity's triumphant, glaring eyes. I take a shaky, simulated breath, forcing my hands to tremble slightly at my sides. It takes every single ounce of my trained willpower to suppress the overwhelming urge to physically throw her out of my house, but the critical nature of the mission dictates my absolute submission. The federal trap requires their total, unquestioning confidence in my surrender. I slowly look up at Felicity, forcing my voice to sound weak, quiet, and entirely broken. I tell her that she wins. I tell her that I cannot possibly fight all of them, that the intense pressure is too much, and that I do not want to completely ruin Colin's life over a single contract. I instruct her to immediately tell Harrison that I will play ball. I promise to personally push the Apex Defense Solutions bid to the final approval stage by tomorrow morning. I tell her they will get their $50 million contract exactly as Harrison demanded. Felicity's face immediately brightens with a sickening, victorious satisfaction. She practically vibrates with the intense thrill of completely breaking my spirit and forcing my submission. She looks at me with supreme, unadulterated pity, completely and utterly blind to the massive federal trap that is currently closing tightly around her entire family. She elegantly adjusts her expensive designer scarf, her lips curling into a wicked, highly triumphant smirk. "Good girl," Felicity says, her voice dripping with absolute cruel satisfaction. "I always knew you'd bend the knee." The Sunday brunch at the estate is a performance of choreographed cruelty. Harrison and Trent are positioned at the head of the long, sun-drenched breakfast table, exuding the suffocating, unearned confidence of men who truly believe they have successfully broken me. Trent is particularly insufferable today. He wears a casual, open-collared shirt that screams weekend leisure, but his eyes remain cold and predatory. He deliberately ignores Colin and Beatrice, focusing all his energy on orchestrating my public humiliation. He treats the entire dining room like his private office, snapping his fingers in my direction whenever he needs something. He has spent the last 10 minutes mocking my military record, calling it a glorified administrative role that gave me an inflated sense of self-importance. He frames my recent security clearance suspension as a well-deserved punishment for my incompetence, his laughter echoing off the expensive vaulted ceilings like a series of sharp, stinging slaps. "Since you have finally learned your proper place in the chain of command, Kira," Trent says, his voice loud enough to command the attention of the entire table. Why don't you make yourself useful for once? Get up and fetch me a fresh mimosa. I prefer mine with a little more champagne than orange juice. It is about time you started serving the family instead of lecturing us about ethics. I feel a familiar, ice-cold detachment settle over me. I look at Trent and see the same pathetic, small-minded boy who used to force Colin to do his history homework during high school, threatening to sabotage his college applications if he did not comply. Nothing has changed. He still measures his worth by how much he can dominate those he considers beneath him. Beatrice watches with a thin, tight-lipped smile of approval, clearly savoring this public display of my total submission. Colin looks at his plate, his face a mask of shame, paralyzed by his own cowardice. I stand up slowly. I walk over to the elaborate sideboard where the drinks are staged. My movements are precise, measured, and entirely calm. I pour the champagne, adding just the right amount of orange juice to satisfy Trent's demand. I carry the glass back to the table, my hand perfectly steady. I place the drink directly in front of him, keeping my eyes cast downward in a deliberate simulation of defeat. I apologize for the delay, I say, keeping my voice quiet and strained. I do not look up. I lean slightly toward Harrison, ensuring he is the primary audience for my next act. I took your advice, Harrison. I spent the last 12 hours bypassing the internal security protocols at the base. I accessed the Project Sentinel database and successfully overrode the encryption requirements. Harrison's eyes widen. He abandons his nonchalant conquering king demeanor, leaning forward until his face is only inches from mine. You did it, he whispers, his voice thick with a mixture of disbelief and intense predatory excitement. I did. I lie, my tone flat, devoid of any genuine conviction. The software prototype is now at the top of the pile. I have flagged the other bids as non-compliant due to outdated security architecture. It is done. The contract will be greenlit by the board tomorrow. The tension at the table snaps. Harrison lets out a booming, triumphant laugh that vibrates through the room. He slams his hand down on the table, not in anger, but in sheer, unadulterated joy. He immediately stands up, raising his own glass in a loud, performative toast. To family loyalty, Harrison bellows, his voice booming with absolute arrogance. To the kind of loyalty that transcends petty rules and ensures our future, to the smartest commander in the United States Navy. Beatrice joins in the toast, her face illuminated by a cold, victorious light. Trent grins, his previous annoyance replaced by the satisfaction of having finally forced my total capitulation. He sips his mimosa, looking at me with a mixture of contempt and relief. They are so thoroughly blinded by the prospect of their $50 million payout that they cannot see the trapdoors opening beneath them. They are so convinced of their own superior intelligence that they have completely failed to consider that I might be playing a game they do not even understand. Harrison reaches into his inner suit jacket pocket. He pulls out a small, unassuming silver USB drive. It catches the sunlight streaming through the windows, glinting like a promise of disaster. He slides it across the polished table toward me, his fingers lingering on the casing for a heartbeat longer than necessary. This contains the final augmented financial records, Harrison says, his voice dropping to a low, serious register. These documents have been carefully prepared to ensure that Apex Defense Solutions appears in perfect financial standing to the Pentagon auditors. They will show an impeccable balance sheet, even if the actual reality is quite different. You need to upload this drive to the Pentagon's secure procurement server tonight, Kira. It is non-negotiable. Once you finish that upload, you are officially in the clear. The investigation goes away, your career is restored, and you will be handsomely compensated for your services. I look at the silver drive. It is a small, portable piece of plastic, but it is the physical evidence that NCIS has been hunting for 18 months. It is the bridge between Harrison's vague, deniable corporate maneuvering and the concrete, actionable proof of federal fraud. It is the key to his prison cell. I will take care of it tonight. I say, my voice perfectly modulated to sound like a woman who has lost her soul and is simply going through the motions. I pick up the USB drive, feeling the cool metal against my skin. I do not pocket it immediately. I let it sit there for a second, allowing Harrison to absorb the sight of his own destruction being safely tucked away. You are a very smart woman, Kira. Harrison says, his tone now almost fatherly, a nauseating attempt to solidify the power dynamic he believes he has created. You finally understand that power is not about following rules. It is about knowing which rules to break to get what you want. You have a very bright future in the private sector if you continue to show this kind of pragmatism. I stand up, clutching the drive. I look at Colin, who is finally looking at me. There is no joy in his eyes, only a hollow, confused sadness. He does not understand the operation. He does not see the danger, he only sees the return of the money he thinks is his birthright. I feel a fleeting moment of genuine sorrow for him, but I push it aside. He made his choice the moment he decided to remain silent while his sister screamed in my face. He made his choice the moment he begged me to betray my oath to keep his trust fund full. I have work to do, I say, turning away from the table. Wait, Beatrice calls out, her voice sharp. I stop but do not turn around. You are forgetting your payment, dear. She slides a second smaller envelope across the table. I know exactly what it contains. More hush money, another transaction in a life she believes is entirely transactional. Keep it, I say without turning back. I think I have earned enough from this family today. I walk out of the dining room, the weight of the silver drive burning in my pocket. I pass through the foyer and exit into the cool, silent garage. As I unlock my car, my pulse is steady. The mission has entered its critical phase. Harrison, Beatrice, and Trent are currently toasting to their own genius, completely unaware that the very thing they believe will save them is the exact thing that will ensure they never hold power in this city again. They think I am a victim of their blackmail, a broken, defeated officer who has finally bent the knee to their superior wealth and influence. They have absolutely no concept of the reality that awaits them by morning. I pull my phone out and send a single prearranged encrypted text message to Special Agent Vance. The package is in my possession. Initiate the final phase. I do not drive back to the house. I drive toward a predetermined location, a dark, deserted parking lot under a highway overpass where an NCIS tactical team is waiting to secure the evidence. My hands are steady on the wheel. Every mile I put between myself and that mansion feels like a step closer to justice. They have spent a decade underestimating me, viewing me as an unpolished, unrefined outsider who had no place in their exclusive high society world. They have treated me like a pawn in their elaborate, self-important games. By sunrise, they will realize that while they were busy playing with their millions and pulling their petty political strings, I was carefully, methodically, and surgically dismantling their entire world. The drive to the meeting point is silent and solitary. I think about the many times I sat through these family dinners listening to Harrison brag about his government contracts and Beatrice mock the people who actually serve this country. I think about the pilots I have trained, the men and women who wake up every morning and strap themselves into a cockpit, trusting that their leadership, their hardware, and their supply chain are sound. Harrison was willing to compromise that trust for a $50 million payout. He was willing to gamble with their lives just to maintain the appearance of a failing defense empire. That is the true crime. That is the betrayal that makes my blood run cold. It is not the personal insults, the snide comments about my background, or even the threat of military prison. It is the deliberate, calculated desecration of the trust placed in our officers. It is the belief that the lives of our service members are disposable if the price is right. Harrison and his family represent the absolute worst elements of the defense industry, the kind of corruption that feeds on the blood and sweat of others while hiding behind suits and society pages. As I pull into the rendezvous point, I see the dark, unmarked SUVs waiting in the shadows. I see the flash of a flashlight signaling me to stop. I put the car in park and turn off the engine. The quiet of the night is absolute, broken only by the hum of distant traffic. This is the end of the line for them. They have had their decade of arrogance, their time of unchecked greed and untouchable influence. But the law, the real law, The one that applies to everyone regardless of their net worth is finally catching up. I step out of the car. The cool air fills my lungs. I walk toward the agents. I am not the commander who was suspended, not the wife who was bullied at a dinner table, and not the victim they thought they had trapped. I am the commander who took their evidence, and I am the one who is going to see them in handcuffs. When the sun rises, the headlines will not be about their anniversary dinner or their successful stock portfolio or their influence in the procurement board. The headlines will be about their arrests, their fraud, and the end of Apex Defense Solutions. And I will be watching it all happen just as I planned. I leave the dark parking lot under the highway overpass and drive back to the quiet, upscale suburb I share with Colin. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service team was fast and flawlessly efficient. Special Agent Vance cloned the silver USB drive in the back of his mobile command center, extracted every single altered financial document, and handed the physical drive right back to me. He instructed me to leave it somewhere visible in my home. He knew Harrison might send someone to verify my compliance, or worse, try to execute the upload himself if he thought I was stalling. I pull into the driveway, kill the engine, and step into the silent house. The heavy mahogany clock in the hallway chimes 2 in the morning. I drop my keys, the silver USB drive, and my unlocked cell phone directly onto the marble kitchen island. I turn my back to fill a glass of water from the sink, exhausted but vibrating with a sharp, focused adrenaline. I hear the soft shuffle of footsteps against the hardwood floor. I turn around and see Colin standing in the archway of the kitchen. He is wearing sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, his eyes bloodshot from a severe lack of sleep. He walks toward the kitchen island intending to grab a bottle of water, but his gaze drops to the marble counter. My cell phone screen illuminates brightly with a new incoming message from Trent. Because the phone is unlocked, the entire text thread is completely visible. Colin stops dead in his tracks. He reaches out and picks up the device. He reads the screen, his brow furrowing in deep confusion. Then he looks down and sees the silver USB drive resting right next to where the phone had been. Colin looks up at me, his face pale and tightly drawn. He holds my phone up in the air, his hand shaking slightly. "What is this, Kira?" he demands, his voice cracking with a mixture of fear and rising anger. "Trent is texting you about military prison. He is talking about Dad having friends in high places. And what is this drive?" He snatches the silver USB stick off the counter, holding it up like a piece of damning evidence. "Dad carries this specific encrypted drive in his briefcase. I have seen it 100 times. Why do you have it? What are you hiding from me?" I do not scramble to make an excuse. I do not play the role of the defeated, submissive wife anymore. I stand up straight, crossing my arms over my chest, and look my husband dead in the eye. I drop the act completely. "I am not hiding anything from you, Colin," I state, my voice ringing with absolute, unyielding authority. "Your father gave me that drive at dinner. It contains highly doctored, fraudulent financial records for Apex Defense Solutions. Your father and your brother are aggressively blackmailing me. They filed a fake anonymous tip with the Inspector General accusing me of accepting bribes. They used their political connections to temporarily suspend my top-secret security clearance. They threatened to have me thrown in federal military prison unless I bypass naval security protocols, approve their failing software bid, and upload that drive to the Pentagon's secure servers." Colin staggers backward, as if I have physically struck him. He drops my phone onto the counter with a loud clatter, but his fist remains tightly closed around the USB drive. He violently shakes his head, his lifelong conditioning instantly rejecting the horrifying reality I have just laid out before him. "No," he stammers, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. "No, you are lying. Dad would never do that. He is tough, he is a shark in the boardroom, but he would never threaten you with prison. He would never commit a federal crime. You are just trying to turn me against them because Beatrice insulted you. Your mother cornered me at a coffee shop this morning and offered me $100,000 in cash to sign the approval." I reply, my tone sharp and completely merciless. When I refused, she explicitly threatened to entirely freeze your trust fund and disinherit you to force your compliance. She is the reason your credit cards were declined this afternoon. They are actively trying to force me to commit federal treason to save their bankrupt company, and they are using your financial dependency as a weapon to make it happen. The color completely drains from Colin's face. The reality of his frozen accounts collides violently with the truth I am telling him. He looks at the silver drive in his hand, then looks at me. The deep ingrained loyalty to his toxic bloodline fights a losing battle against the undeniable facts right in front of him. He cannot reconcile the image of his prestigious high society parents with the ruthless criminal blackmailers I have just exposed. "I do not believe you," Colin whispers, though his trembling voice betrays his absolute terror. "I am going to the estate right now. I am going to ask my father face to face. He will explain this. There is a logical explanation." He turns and practically runs out of the kitchen. He grabs his car keys from the hook by the door and storms out into the night. The heavy front door slams shut, rattling the picture frames on the walls. I do not chase after him. I do not try to stop him. He needs to hear the absolute horrifying truth directly from the source. I walk into the living room, sit down on the sofa, and begin the agonizing wait. I know exactly what Harrison and Beatrice will do when cornered. They will not apologize. They will instantly prioritize their own survival over their son's marriage and morality. 2 hours pass. The silence in the house is deafening. I systematically pack a heavy tactical duffel bag with my uniforms, my secure documents, and my personal essentials. If Colin comes back and defends their actions, if he expects me to bend the knee to his family after hearing the truth, I will walk out the door and never return. I place the packed bag near the foyer. At exactly 4:30 in the morning, headlights sweep across the front windows. I hear a car engine cut off in the driveway. The lock clicks and the front door slowly opens. Colin steps into the foyer. He looks entirely destroyed. His shoulders are slumped, his chest is hollowed out, and his eyes are wide and completely vacant. He looks like a man who has just watched his entire universe burn to the ground. He is carrying a large, heavy duffel bag over his shoulder. He drops it onto the hardwood floor. It lands with a heavy, definitive thud. He walks slowly into the living room and stops a few feet away from me. He does not say a word. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out his cell phone, and taps the screen. He maximizes the volume and presses play on a voice memo. He places the phone gently onto the glass coffee table between us. The audio recording begins. The sound quality is slightly muffled, indicating the phone was hidden in his pocket, but the voices are crystal clear. I hear Colin's voice, first shaking with anger, confronting his father about the blackmail and the fake Inspector General tip. I hear him beg his parents to deny it. Then Beatrice's voice slices through the audio, cold, sharp, and dripping with absolute disdain. "Grow up, Colin," her recorded voice snaps. "Kira is entirely expendable. She was always a temporary fixture. We needed a secure contract, and she has the authority to grant it. You need to immediately divorce her the second this investigation goes public. We will distance the family from her crimes, protect our assets, and find you a wife who actually understands the value of our legacy." Colin's recorded voice breaks as he asks how they could ruin my life and ask him to abandon his marriage. Harrison's voice booms next, loud, aggressive, and devoid of any paternal warmth. "Your marriage is a bad investment that is currently costing me my company." Harrison growls. "You will do exactly what you are told. If Kira is too much of a coward to upload those files, you will take control of your own house. You live there. You have access to her home office. You steal her military laptop while she is sleeping. You plug that drive in, and you execute the transfer yourself. You do it for the family, Colin, or you will not receive another dime from me as long as you live." The recording cuts off with a sharp click. The silence that follows is absolute and suffocating. Colin's parents did not just confess to blackmailing me, they actively, aggressively demanded that their own son commit a severe federal crime against a military officer. They ordered him to steal classified naval equipment and frame his own wife to save their bank accounts. They viewed him not as a son, but as a convenient accomplice. Colin stands in the center of the living room, staring at the phone on the glass table. The heavy, suffocating chains of his lifelong conditioning have finally shattered. The desperate need for his parents' approval, the constant fear of losing his inheritance, the endless apologies for their toxic behavior, it is all completely gone, burned away by the undeniable reality of their utter depravity. He looks up and meets my eyes. His face is pale, but his jaw is locked tight with a sudden dangerous resolve. He points down at the heavy duffel bag he dropped on the floor. "I packed my things," Colin says, his voice devoid of fear, replaced by a cold, hardened fury. "I recorded them, every single word." He reaches down, picks up his phone, and firmly hands it to me, passing over the ultimate weapon. "They aren't my family anymore," Colin states, his eyes burning with absolute conviction. "Burn them to the ground." I take the phone from Colin, feeling the cold, hard metal of the device that holds the final nail in his family's coffin. I look at him, my husband, stripped of his lifelong delusions, standing before me with nothing but the brutal, undeniable truth. I do not offer him empty comfort. I simply nod, slide his phone into the pocket of my tactical duffel bag, and walk out the front door. The mission is no longer just a federal sting. It is a personal execution. 48 hours later, the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton in downtown Washington is practically vibrating with the clinking of crystal and the low, steady hum of generational power. It is the night of the annual Navy Aviation Charity Gala. The room is a sea of immaculate tuxedos, glittering evening gowns, and pristine military dress uniforms. I stand near the grand entryway, perfectly still in my Navy service dress whites. The gold shoulder boards display the silver oak leaf of a commander. The heavy polished gold wings of a naval aviator rest squarely above my ribbons. I am not hiding in the shadows tonight. The encrypted USB drive is already safely in the hands of the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Special Agent Vance has his teams positioned at every exit, disguised as hotel security and valet staff. The trap is completely set, and the jaws are primed to snap shut. I scan the crowded ballroom, my eyes cutting through the throngs of wealthy donors and defense contractors. It does not take long to spot them. Harrison and Trent are holding court near the center ice sculpture, acting exactly like conquering kings. Harrison is wearing a custom-tailored tuxedo that costs more than most sailors make in a year. Trent is standing beside him, wearing his service dress uniform. He is a lieutenant, a junior officer, whose career has been entirely padded and protected by his father's relentless political maneuvering. Trent is gesturing animatedly, his face flushed with the arrogance of a man who believes he has just secured a $50 million empire. Harrison is aggressively shaking hands with a circle of high-ranking naval officers, explicitly using this charity event to cement his fraudulent victory. I watch as he claps a two-star admiral on the shoulder, laughing loudly. He is openly boasting. Even from across the room, I can read his lips and hear the distinct bragging cadence of his voice. He is telling anyone who will listen that Apex Defense Solutions has successfully navigated the rigorous procurement process. He is proudly announcing that their revolutionary software prototype has officially secured the tactical aviation contract. He believes my forced submission has cleared the runway. He believes the Pentagon servers are currently digesting his fake financial records, officially crowning him the undisputed victor of the defense sector. Trent is playing the role of the dutiful, heroic military son. He nods along with his father's boasts, puffing out his chest and acting as the living, breathing bridge between Apex Defense Solutions and the United States Navy. Trent looks incredibly smug, drinking his whiskey and surveying the ballroom as if he owns the building. Then Trent's eyes lock directly onto mine. His smug expression instantly twists into a malicious, deeply cruel sneer. He whispers something into his father's ear. Harrison turns, spots me standing near the entrance, and offers a slow, mocking toast in my direction. They think I am here to witness their triumph. They think I am here to play the role of the defeated, compliant little wife forced to silently endure their victory lap. Trent detaches himself from his father's circle. He spots a senior officer walking nearby, a stern, gray-haired Navy captain who wears the command pin of a carrier air wing. This is Captain Miller, Trent's direct commanding officer at the naval base. Trent immediately intercepts Captain Miller smoothly, guiding the senior officer across the ballroom floor, walking purposefully in my direct path. Trent is actively seeking an audience for his cruelty. He wants to publicly humiliate me, to assert his dominance in front of his boss, completely unaware of the absolute devastation heading his way. I remain perfectly planted in my spot. I keep my posture rigidly straight, my chin parallel to the floor, my hands resting lightly at my sides. I watch them approach, feeling the sharp, cold clarity of a predator watching its prey step willingly into a snare. Well, well, look who decided to show up and pretend she belongs here, Trent announces loudly as he closes the distance. His voice is intentionally raised, designed to draw the attention of the surrounding guests. He stops a few feet in front of me, adopting a highly casual, utterly disrespectful stance. He does not salute. He does not offer a greeting. He simply looks me up and down with overt, undisguised revulsion. Captain Miller stops beside him, momentarily distracted by a passing waiter. His back turned slightly toward me as he grabs a glass of water. Trent leans in his breath, reeking of expensive bourbon. I am honestly surprised you had the nerve to put that uniform on tonight, Kira, Trent says, his tone dripping with acidic condescension. Especially after you completely folded like a cheap lawn chair. Did you come here to fetch my drinks again? Or are you just hoping to catch a few crumbs from my father's table? I do not flinch. I do not break eye contact. I let his words hang in the air, allowing his arrogance to fully expose itself. You really think you are something special, do you not? Trent continues, growing bolder, by my silence, misinterpreting my calm demeanor for fear. He turns his head slightly, ensuring Captain Miller is within earshot. Captain, I want you to meet my brother's pathetic excuse for a wife. She is the perfect example of what is wrong with the modern Navy. She is nothing but a diversity desk jockey, a glorified administrative assistant who pushes paper around and pretends she knows the first thing about tactical warfare. We practically had to hold her hand to get our software approved. Trent smirks, turning completely toward his commanding officer, waiting for the older man to join in his mockery. He expects Captain Miller to laugh, to dismiss me, to validate Trent's immense, unearned superiority. Captain Miller turns around slowly, his glass of water in hand. He looks past Trent. He looks directly at me. The transition is instantaneous and breathtaking to witness. The casual, relaxed posture of the senior officer vanishes in a microsecond. Captain Miller's eyes lock onto the gold oak leaves on my shoulders. His gaze drops to the gold naval aviator wings pinned tightly above my ribbons. He registers the combat action ribbons, the extensive deployment markers, and the undeniable fact that he is standing in front of the head of the Tactical Aviation Procurement Board. Captain Miller does not laugh. He does not smile. His face transforms into a rigid mask of absolute horrified professional shock. He realizes in real time that his junior officer is actively loudly insulting a highly decorated superior officer in the middle of a formal military function. Captain Miller's heels snap together with a sharp, audible crack that echoes over the classical music playing in the background. His spine straightens into a perfect, rigid line. He brings his right hand up in a crisp, flawless, intensely respectful salute. "Good evening, Commander Bennett," Captain Miller says, his voice ringing with absolute deference and a thinly veiled undercurrent of sheer panic. "It is an honor to see you tonight, ma'am." I return the salute with slow, deliberate precision. I hold his gaze for a second before my eyes shift back to Trent. Trent's face undergoes a catastrophic transformation. The arrogant, mocking sneer melts away instantly, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. All the blood rapidly drains from his face, leaving his skin a sickly pale white. His jaw drops slightly. His eyes dart frantically from Captain Miller's rigid salute to the gold oak leaves on my shoulders, as if he is seeing my rank for the very first time. He has spent his entire life viewing me as nothing more than an inconvenient civilian attachment to his family, a poor girl from Ohio he could bully without consequence. He has completely ignored the reality of my military career, actively blinding himself to the authority I actually wield. Now standing in a room full of admirals, generals, and defense secretaries, the brutal reality of the military hierarchy crashes down on his head. He is a lieutenant, I am a commander. I outrank him. I outgun him. And he has just publicly insulted me, calling me a diversity desk jockey right to my face in front of his direct commanding officer. Lieutenant Blackwell, I say, my voice carrying the sharp, cold edge of absolute authority. I do not raise my voice, but the commanding tone slices effortlessly through the ambient noise of the ballroom. Are you currently having difficulty recognizing the rank structure of the United States Navy? Or do you simply make a habit of publicly disrespecting senior officers at formal charity events? Trent opens his mouth, but no words come out. He stammers a pathetic, strangled sound escaping his throat. He is completely paralyzed. He realizes he has just committed a severe violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. He realizes that Captain Miller is staring at him with a look of murderous, career-ending fury. Captain Miller turns his head sharply toward Trent. "Lieutenant!" The captain hisses, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "You will snap to attention and salute the commander right now, and you will pray she does not have you thrown in the brig for insubordination before this gala is over." Trent scrambles to comply. His movements are jerky, panicked, and entirely devoid of his usual manufactured grace. He snaps his heels together, his hands trembling violently as he brings his arm up in a desperate, sloppy salute. "I apologize, ma'am." Trent chokes out his voice, barely a whisper, completely stripped of his bravado. "I spoke out of turn." "You spoke exactly as you were trained to speak, Lieutenant." I reply, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet register that only he and the captain can hear. "You spoke like a man who believes the rules do not apply to his family. But I promise you, Trent, the rules absolutely apply." I do not dismiss him. I leave him standing there at attention, his arm locked in a salute, his face burning with profound, inescapable humiliation. I turn my gaze toward the center of the room. Harrison is still laughing, completely unaware that his son has just been publicly castrated. He is unaware that the federal agents are quietly sealing the perimeter. He is unaware that the flash drive he handed me is currently unlocking federal indictments. I look back at Trent, who is sweating profusely under the blazing chandeliers. I lean in slightly, letting him see the absolute merciless executioner hiding behind my composed smile. "Keep your arm up, Lieutenant," I command coldly. "You are going to need the practice for when the federal marshals walk through those double doors." I turn on my heel and walk away, the crisp white fabric of my uniform snapping with every precise step. I leave Trent paralyzed in terror, his world rapidly collapsing as I prepare to deliver the final crushing blow to his father's corrupt empire. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton is a swirling ocean of tailored silk, glittering diamonds, and pristine military uniforms, completely insulated from the harsh realities of the defense world it claims to support. I navigate through the dense crowd, moving with calculated grace, leaving Trent sweating and hyperventilating in the periphery. My destination is the front of the room near the elevated stage where the evening's primary addresses are scheduled to occur. The orchestral music swells beautifully, masking the low hum of hundreds of overlapping conversations. Waiters in pristine white jackets weave between the circular tables, carrying heavy silver trays loaded with champagne flutes and delicate hors d'oeuvres. I secure a perfect vantage point near the front row of tables, specifically designated for the highest-ranking defense officials and the most generous corporate donors. I watch as Harrison confidently detaches himself from a cluster of three-star admirals. He straightens his immaculate tuxedo jacket, casually checking his reflection in a passing mirrored tray. He is entirely oblivious to the catastrophic scene that just unfolded between his son and Captain Miller. Harrison's ego is a massive fortress, completely shielding him from any possibility that his meticulously laid plans are rapidly unraveling. He moves toward the short flight of velvet-covered stairs leading up to the main stage. He is not the scheduled keynote speaker, but in his mind, his vast wealth grants him unquestioned ownership of the microphone. He intends to hijack the charity gala to cement his fraudulent victory, forcing the Navy's hand by announcing the contract in front of the press and the top brass. It is a bold, highly aggressive maneuver born of pure, unadulterated hubris. As I stand watching him ascend the stairs, I feel a sharp, sudden presence at my right shoulder. The cloying scent of expensive, heavy floral perfume washes over me. Beatrice slides into the space beside me, clutching a crystal champagne flute. Her face is arranged in a flawless mask of polite society interest, but her eyes are burning with a toxic, triumphant venom. She leans in dangerously close, pretending to be a supportive mother-in-law, sharing an intimate moment during a prestigious event. "You look remarkably composed for a woman who just sold her soul," Beatrice whispers, her voice a low, harsh hiss that barely reaches my ears over the swelling music. "I was actually worried you might have a pathetic little breakdown tonight, but you are playing your part perfectly, Kira. I suppose basic survival instinct is the one useful trait you brought from your miserable lower-class upbringing." I do not turn my head to acknowledge her. I keep my eyes fixed squarely on the stage, watching her husband approach the heavy wooden podium. "You belong to us now," Beatrice continues, her tone dripping with absolute terrifying satisfaction. "You finally understand that your fancy little uniform and your ridiculous military rules are completely meaningless against real power. Collins' trust fund will be restored tomorrow morning precisely as promised. We will buy him a new luxury car to celebrate. You will go back to your desk, you will push our paperwork through whenever we demand it, and you will never again dare to question your betters. If you ever step out of line, if you ever look at me with that disrespectful glare again, I will have Harrison release the audio of your little security override confession directly to the Inspector General. We own your career, Commander. We own your marriage. You are nothing but an obedient asset on our private payroll." Her words are meant to crush me, to grind my spirit into the plush carpet, but they only solidify the icy resolve hardening in my chest. She is freely confessing to ongoing extortion in a room actively monitored by federal agents. Her arrogance is not just deeply offensive, it is legally suicidal. "I understand exactly who you are, Beatrice," I say quietly, my voice devoid of any emotion. "And I know exactly what my future holds." Beatrice smirks, taking a delicate sip of her expensive champagne. "Good girl. Now stand quietly and watch my husband claim his rightful prize." On the stage, Harrison reaches the podium. He taps the microphone twice, the sharp thumping sound echoing loudly across the massive ballroom. The classical orchestral music immediately fades out. The low hum of conversation slowly dies away as hundreds of faces turn toward the stage. The overhead spotlights shift rapidly, converging on Harrison, bathing him in a bright, blinding white light. He grips the edges of the podium, looking out over the sea of military leaders and corporate titans with the supreme confidence of a conquering emperor surveying his vast territory. "Good evening, distinguished guests, admirals, generals, and loyal friends." Harrison begins, his voice resonating with deep, practiced authority. He does not bother to introduce himself. He operates under the arrogant assumption that every single person in this room knows exactly who he is. "We are gathered here tonight to celebrate the unparalleled strength and the enduring legacy of naval aviation. We celebrate the brave men and women who defend our skies. But we also must celebrate the vital, unbreakable partnership between the United States military and the private sector innovators who equip them for the intense challenges of tomorrow." I watch the faces of the senior military officers sitting at the front tables. A few of them shift uncomfortably in their seats. This is a designated charity event meant strictly to raise funds for the families of fallen aviators. It is absolutely not the appropriate venue for a corporate sales pitch. But Harrison does not care about military propriety. He only cares about power, and he is about to overplay his hand in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. For the past decade, Apex Defense Solutions has been deeply committed to providing the Navy with the most advanced, secure, and reliable tactical systems on the market. Harrison continues, his voice steadily rising in volume and intensity. "We have faced rigorous, exhausting scrutiny. We have successfully navigated the complex, sometimes frustrating bureaucratic challenges of the defense procurement process. But we have always emerged victorious because our technology is simply unmatched. We do not just meet the rigid federal standard, we set the standard." Beatrice leans closer to me, her shoulder pressing hard against my arm. Listen closely to him, she whispers venomously. This is what real power sounds like. He is brilliantly forcing their hand. Once he says it publicly tonight, the procurement board cannot possibly back down without causing a massive public relations disaster for the Pentagon. I remain completely silent, my eyes locked on the man who tried to destroy my life. That is why I am incredibly proud to stand before you tonight and share some truly monumental news. Harrison announces, spreading his arms wide, encompassing the entire room in his grandiose theatrical gesture. While the final paperwork is currently being processed by our diligent procurement officers, I am thrilled to officially announce an impending partnership that will fundamentally redefine naval tactical architecture. Apex Defense Solutions has officially secured the primary federal contract for Project Sentinel. A massive ripple of shocked murmurs washes through the grand ballroom. This is an egregious breach of federal protocol. Contract awards of this magnitude are strictly classified until officially announced by the Department of Defense Public Affairs Office. Bypassing the Pentagon to announce a $50 million contract at a civilian charity gala is incredibly presumptuous. The high-ranking admirals in the front row exchange sharp, deeply concerned glances. Captain Miller, who has finally managed to extract himself from a hyperventilating Trent, stares at the stage in absolute unbridled horror. Harrison completely ignores the shifting, highly uncomfortable energy radiating through the room. He thrives on it. He genuinely believes he is executing a masterstroke of corporate strategy. He raises his right hand, pointing directly toward the table where the highest-ranking defense officials are seated in shocked silence. This partnership guarantees that our brave pilots will fly with the most advanced, unbreakable security software ever developed. Harrison boasts, his face flushed with the intense thrill of his own perceived brilliance. We are not just a private contractor, we are the ultimate shield that protects the United States Navy. And we look forward to many more years of highly profitable, deeply successful collaboration. Harrison expects a roaring round of applause. He fully expects the room to rise to their feet in a massive standing ovation, acknowledging his supreme victory and his untouchable elite status. He stands tall at the wooden podium, smiling broadly, eagerly, waiting for the adoration to wash over him. Instead, the microphone emits a sharp, piercing screech of audio feedback. The terrible high-pitched sound cuts through the ballroom like a physical blade, causing several wealthy guests to flinch and immediately cover their ears. Harrison taps the microphone aggressively, his confident smile faltering for a brief, uncertain second. "Testing, testing," Harrison says, but his voice does not project through the massive sound system. The microphone is completely dead. He frowns, looking off to the side of the stage toward the audio-visual control booth, clearly expecting an immediate fix from the hotel staff. He raises his hand to signal them, profound annoyance flashing across his polished features. Suddenly, the main spotlight illuminating Harrison abruptly shuts off, plunging the stage into a dim, muted shadow. The ambient lighting in the ballroom flickers once, shifting from a warm, elegant gold to a stark, harsh, unforgiving white. The sudden, violent change in lighting instantly alters the entire atmosphere of the room, stripping away the luxury and replacing it with a cold, clinical exposure. Beatrice stiffens beside me. "What on earth is going on?" she mutters, genuine confusion finally piercing her arrogant facade. "Did they blow a circuit?" I do not answer her. My eyes are fixed directly on the heavy brass-studded oak doors at the very back of the grand ballroom. With a massive echoing thud that reverberates through the sudden confused silence of the crowd, the double doors violently swing open. They hit the retaining walls with a loud, violent crash. The low murmur of the guests instantly ceases. Every single head in the room turns away from Harrison and toward the back of the hall. A unified, highly rhythmic sound of heavy boots striking the polished hardwood floor fills the void. Marching straight down the center aisle, moving with absolute terrifying precision, is a fully armed detachment of military police. They are wearing tactical gear, their faces set in grim, uncompromising masks. Flanking the military police are 4 men wearing dark suits and federal credentials hanging from lanyards around their necks. Leading the entire formation is Special Agent Vance. His eyes are locked directly on the stage. The federal agents do not pause. They do not look left or right. They march forward with the overwhelming, unstoppable force of an avalanche. The high society guests immediately scramble out of the way, frantically pulling their chairs back and pressing themselves against the tables to clear the aisle. The wealthy donors and defense contractors stare in absolute frozen shock. The silence in the ballroom is profound, broken only by the sharp, synchronized marching of the federal response team rapidly closing the distance to the stage. The heavy, synchronized footfalls of the military police echo like a terrifying drumbeat against the pristine walls of the grand ballroom. The perfectly manicured crowd parts like the Red Sea falling over themselves to clear the center aisle. High society socialites clutch their pearls and defense contractors instinctively take a step back, their faces draining of color. The sudden violent intrusion of armed federal agents shatters the carefully curated illusion of untouchable power that usually insulates this room. Harrison stands frozen at the wooden podium, his hands still gripping the edges, his mouth slightly open. For a fleeting, almost comical second, his immense ego tries to process the scene. He genuinely looks around as if expecting the agents to march past him and arrest a rival contractor. He simply cannot fathom a universe where he is the target. He adjusts his tailored tuxedo jacket, squaring his shoulders, projecting a facade of mild, irritated curiosity at this disruption of his grand announcement. Trent is entirely different. The young lieutenant is currently trembling so violently that the ice in his empty glass chatters against the crystal. He shrinks back, trying to hide himself behind the towering ice sculpture and the broad shoulders of the senior officers nearby. His previous arrogance, the sneering confidence that allowed him to relentlessly mock my background and demand I serve him drinks, has completely evaporated. He looks like a terrified, cornered animal. Captain Miller, standing only a few feet away, does not move to protect his junior officer. The gray-haired captain maintains his rigid posture, his eyes locked straight ahead, completely disassociating himself from the catastrophic disaster unfolding beside him. Special Agent Vance leads the formation with absolute, unwavering purpose. The federal response team does not pause to offer pleasantries or flash badges at the two-star admirals sitting in the front row. They bypass the highest-ranking military officials in the room, as if they were nothing more than decorative furniture. Vance's eyes are locked with laser precision on the two men currently standing near the stage. The absolute finality of his approach leaves no room for misinterpretation. They have not come to negotiate. They have come to execute a total dismantling of the Apex Defense Solutions empire. Vance stops directly in front of Trent. Two heavily armed military police officers immediately flank the trembling lieutenant, boxing him in completely. The silence in the ballroom is absolute, a heavy, suffocating vacuum waiting to be filled. "Lieutenant Trent Blackwell," Vance says, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that carries effortlessly across the silent room. "You are hereby detained under the authority of the Naval Criminal Investigative Service and the United States Department of Defense." Trent's jaw drops. His chest heaves with rapid, panicked breaths. He looks desperately toward his father on the stage, but Harrison is completely immobilized by shock. "There has to be a mistake," Trent stammers, his voice cracking into a high, pathetic whine. "I am an officer. My father is Harrison Blackwell. We just secured the tactical software contract. You cannot do this to me. I am a commissioned officer." "Not anymore." Captain Miller's voice rings out cold and merciless. Captain Miller steps forward, his face a mask of absolute, unforgiving military discipline. He reaches out and grabs the gold insignia pinned to Trent's collar. With a sharp, violent yank, Miller physically rips the rank insignia right off the fabric of Trent's service dress uniform. The tearing of the heavy material echoes sharply. Miller tosses the pins onto a nearby table where they clatter uselessly against the fine china. Trent lets out a strangled, humiliating gasp, looking down at his torn uniform in complete horror. The ultimate symbol of his protected privileged status has been physically stripped away in front of the entire naval aviation leadership. "Trent Blackwell, you are under arrest," Vance continues, completely unfazed by the physical stripping of rank. You are formally charged with severe violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, including active extortion conduct unbecoming an officer and the federal blackmail of a commanding superior officer. Put your hands behind your back. The military police officers do not give Trent a moment to argue. They grab his arms, twisting them roughly behind his back. The sharp metallic ratcheting of heavy steel handcuffs clicks loudly, locking Trent into place. He begins to openly weep, the harsh, ugly sounds of pure panic echoing through the terrified crowd as he is violently shoved into the custody of the armed guards. Vance does not linger on the weeping boy. He turns his attention to the stage. He slowly walks up the short velvet-covered stairs, stepping directly into the harsh white spotlight that was meant to illuminate Harrison's ultimate victory. Harrison backs away from the wooden podium, his hands raised defensively in the air. "Harrison Blackwell," Vance states, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "You are under arrest by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Defense. You are charged with massive federal bribery, systemic defense fraud, and executing a coordinated conspiracy to extort a high-ranking military official." The click of the handcuffs securing Harrison's wrists sends a collective shocked gasp rippling through the wealthy donors and flag officers. Harrison's eyes bulge with furious, unrestrained panic. His polished corporate facade instantly disintegrates, revealing the desperate, vicious criminal hiding underneath. He thrashes against the grip of the federal agents, his face turning a deep, violently angry shade of crimson. "This is a setup!" Harrison screams, his voice echoing wildly across the grand ballroom. Saliva flies from his lips as he struggles against the steel cuffs. "I am being framed. Look at her. Look at Commander Bennett." He twists his neck, glaring directly at me where I stand calmly near the entrance. "She is a liar. She is a fraud. She fabricated this entire investigation because she was angry about her security clearance. I have friends in high places. I play golf with the senators who write your budget, Vance. You are all going to lose your jobs for this." Harrison's desperate screams bounce off the crystal chandeliers. He is trying to leverage his political connections, desperately attempting to cast doubt and paint me as a disgruntled, vindictive officer. He looks at the admirals, begging them silently to intervene, but the senior military leadership remains completely frozen, staring at the disgraced CEO with absolute disgust. I take a slow, deep breath. The time for hiding behind a mask of submission is officially over. I step forward, walking calmly and purposefully toward the center of the room. The crowd parts for me, offering me a wide, unobstructed path. I walk directly to the central audio-visual control console situated near the edge of the stage. The hotel technician manning the board looks at me with wide, terrified eyes. I do not ask for permission. I reach down and firmly plug a secondary auxiliary cable from my encrypted cell phone directly into the master sound system of the ballroom. I turn to face Harrison, who is currently being physically restrained by two large federal agents. I look at his red, sweating face, and I offer him a cold, totally uncompromising smile. "You wanted to make an announcement to the entire procurement board tonight, Harrison," I say, my voice perfectly calm and completely steady. "I think it is only fair that we let them hear exactly how you conduct your business." I press play on my phone screen. I immediately push the master volume slider on the control board all the way to the maximum limit. The massive high-definition concert speakers suspended around the perimeter of the ballroom suddenly crackle to life. The audio is crystal clear, perfectly enhanced by the state-of-the-art sound system. The recording I captured on my smartwatch at the coffee shop begins to play, blending seamlessly into the recording Colin captured of his parents earlier that afternoon. Beatrice's sharp, arrogant voice booms through the hall, bouncing off the walls with terrifying clarity. "There is exactly $100,000 in untraceable cash resting right there," the speakers blare. "Take the envelope and just sign Harrison's approval for the software contract." A collective gasp of sheer horror ripples through the room. The admirals in the front row go completely rigid, their faces hardening into masks of pure, unadulterated fury. But the recording does not stop. It seamlessly transitions to Harrison's booming, aggressive threats. Kira is entirely expendable. Harrison's recorded voice roars through the speakers, his vicious tone perfectly matching the man currently struggling in handcuffs. She was always a temporary fixture. We needed a secure contract, and she has the authority to grant it. You steal her military laptop while she is sleeping. You plug that drive in and you execute the transfer yourself. The audio plays out every single threat, every explicit bribe, and every undeniable confession of their massive coordinated fraud. The evidence is absolute, public, and devastating. The entire naval aviation leadership has just listened to the CEO of Apex Defense Solutions confess to federal treason. Harrison stops struggling. He slumps forward, the fight completely draining out of his body as the reality of his total destruction settles over him. He knows that his political connections cannot save him from a public, undeniable confession broadcasted to the highest-ranking military officials in the country. He is finished. Trent is openly sobbing on the floor, his torn uniform a stark representation of his ruined life. The federal agents maintain their iron grip on Harrison, preparing to forcefully march him out of the ballroom and into the back of a waiting transport vehicle. The silence following the audio playback is heavier and more profound than before. It is the silence of an empire turning into dust. Suddenly, a sharp, feral scream shatters the quiet. Beatrice breaks away from the cluster of stunned socialites. Her perfectly coiffed hair is disheveled, her expensive designer gown twisting around her legs as she sprints blindly across the polished hardwood floor. Her face is contorted into a mask of pure, unhinged madness. All of her polished high society composure is gone, replaced by the violently aggressive thrashing of a woman who has just watched her wealth, her status, and her family stripped away in a matter of minutes. She lunges directly at me, her hands curled into desperate clawing claws aiming straight for my face. "You miserable, ungrateful monster!" Beatrice screams, her voice cracking with a high-pitched, hysterical fury. "You set us up. You destroyed my husband. You ruined my son. You destroyed my entire family." She throws all of her weight forward, attempting to physically strike me in front of the federal agents. I do not flinch. I do not step back. I stand my ground. As her hands rake through the air toward my face, I bring my left arm up in a fluid, blindingly fast motion. I catch her wrist effortlessly in midair. My grip is absolute, locking around her delicate bones like a vice of solid steel. The sudden violent halt to her momentum violently jerks her shoulder, causing her to let out a sharp gasp of pain. She struggles against my hold, her expensive bracelets rattling against my uniform sleeve, but she cannot break free. I look down into her wild, terrified, tear-streaked eyes. The arrogant, untouchable matriarch who tried to buy my honor in a cheap coffee shop is now nothing more than a broken, desperate criminal struggling against a superior force. I lean in slightly, letting my voice drop to a cold, merciless whisper that cuts through her frantic sobbing. "You destroyed yourselves." I state my words carrying the absolute final weight of a judge delivering a death sentence. "I just provided the rope." I release her wrist with a sharp, dismissive shove. Beatrice stumbles backward, completely losing her balance, and collapses into a pathetic weeping heap on the ballroom floor. She covers her face with her trembling hands, her sobs echoing through the silent, judgmental crowd. I turn away from her, adjusting the cuffs of my pristine white uniform, completely unbothered by the wreckage left in my wake. The military police move in, grabbing Beatrice by the arms and hauling her roughly to her feet to join her husband and son in federal custody. The shadow operation is over. The trap has sprung and the rot has been permanently severed from the chain of command. I watch them drag the Blackwell family out of the ballroom, knowing my integrity and my oath remain completely unbroken. The blinding flashes of camera lenses replace the glittering chandeliers of the Ritz-Carlton. By sunrise, the spectacular downfall of the Blackwell family is the lead story on every major news network across the globe. Harrison and Trent remain locked in federal holding cells, denied bail due to the severe national security implications of their charges. Beatrice, however, manages to secure a temporary release by emptying a massive personal contingency account. She emerges from the courthouse wearing the same rumpled designer gown from the night before, her face shielded by oversized sunglasses. She steps into a waiting town car and begins formulating her counterattack. She operates under the absolute delusion that her generational wealth and social standing will somehow shield her from the brutal reality of federal indictments. Beatrice believes she can simply spin the narrative. She has spent decades ruling Washington elite society with an iron fist, ruthlessly excommunicating anyone who suffered even a minor public scandal. She assumes her loyal court of wealthy socialites will rally behind her. The moment she returns to her sprawling Georgetown estate, she makes dozens of phone calls expecting sympathy, outrage on her behalf, and immediate offers of high-powered legal assistance. Instead, she receives absolute deafening silence. Her closest confidants send her directly to voicemail, the wives of senators and defense contractors, women who eagerly drank her expensive wine just 48 hours ago, completely sever all ties. Refusing to accept this silent rejection, she showers changes into a pristine tailored Chanel suit and orders her driver to take her directly to the ultra-exclusive Potomac Country Club. This is her sanctuary, the undisputed epicenter of her social power. She intends to walk into the dining room, hold her head high, and demonstrate that the Blackwell matriarch cannot be broken by a fabricated military witch hunt. She strides through the heavy brass doors, demanding her usual table by the window. The grand dining room instantly falls deathly quiet. Every eye turns toward her. There are no warm greetings. There are no sympathetic smiles. The elite members stare at her with undisguised revulsion. The club manager intercepts her before she can take another step. He hands her a crisp white envelope. He informs her loudly enough for the surrounding tables to hear that the board of directors held an emergency session at dawn. Due to the severe, highly public nature of her federal indictment for defense fraud and extortion, her lifetime membership has been permanently revoked, effective immediately. He asks her to leave the premises before he is forced to call the local authorities to report a trespasser. Beatrice snatches the envelope, her face flushing a deep mottled red. She looks around the room, desperately seeking a single friendly face. Women she mentored turn their heads away. Men her husband funded suddenly find their coffee cups incredibly interesting. The absolute social collapse she spent her life weaponizing against others has finally come for her. She turns on her heel and marches out the doors, her humiliation absolute and entirely public. But Beatrice Blackwell does not know how to surrender. Driven by a toxic cocktail of narcissism and sheer desperation, she retreats to her mansion and decides to seize control of the media narrative. She cannot rely on her husband's corporate lawyers who are frantically trying to distance themselves from the criminal charges. She cannot rely on her social circle. She realizes she must take the fight directly to the public. She hires a boutique, aggressively ruthless public relations firm that specializes in crisis management and character assassination. She instructs them to invite every major news outlet, every defense blogger, and every political correspondent to the front gates of her estate for an immediate live press conference. Her strategy is entirely predictable and deeply malicious. She intends to paint me as a disgruntled lower-class opportunist who fabricated audio recordings and manipulated federal agents simply because I was jealous of their wealth and angry about my temporary security clearance suspension. She believes she can leverage her polished aristocratic demeanor to cast doubt on the Naval Criminal Investigative Service and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the manicured front lawn of the Blackwell estate is swarming with reporters, camera crews, and satellite news vans. Microphones bristle from a hastily erected wooden podium, positioned perfectly to showcase the massive multi-million-dollar mansion in the background. Beatrice emerges from the heavy front doors, projecting the image of a stoic, wrongfully accused matriarch. She walks slowly to the podium, her expression a masterclass in manufactured grief and righteous indignation. She adjusts the microphones, takes a deep breath, and looks directly into the bank of television cameras. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice." Beatrice begins, her voice perfectly modulated to sound both strong and deeply wounded. "My family has dedicated our entire lives to serving and protecting the United States of America. We have built an unblemished legacy of innovation and patriotism. Yet last night we were subjected to a horrifying, entirely fabricated public spectacle. The reporters lean in, their cameras flashing rapidly. Beatrice gains confidence, her natural arrogance bleeding through the edges of her practiced victimhood. She points a manicured finger directly at the nearest camera lens. My husband and my son are currently sitting in federal holding cells based on the malicious lies of one vindictive, unstable woman. Beatrice declares, her voice ringing with aggressive conviction. Commander Kira Bennett is a disgruntled officer who has engaged in a systematic, deeply personal campaign to destroy the Blackwell name. She used her position within the Navy to manufacture false evidence. She manipulated federal agents. She is an opportunist who married into our family specifically to drain our resources, and when we finally recognized her true nature and attempted to distance ourselves, she orchestrated this absurd theatrical arrest out of pure spite. Beatrice pauses, letting her venomous accusations hang in the air for maximum dramatic effect. She intends to completely assassinate my character on live national television. She expects the reporters to start shouting sympathetic questions, to ask for more details about my supposed manipulation and greed. She believes she is winning. She believes she has successfully shifted the spotlight away from her own extortion and firmly onto my alleged treachery. We will not be intimidated, Beatrice continues, raising her chin defiantly. We will fight these baseless, absurd charges with every resource at our disposal. We will expose Commander Bennett for the fraud that she is, and we will restore our family's pristine reputation. The truth will absolutely prevail. The truth does indeed prevail, but it arrives much faster and with far more force than Beatrice could ever anticipate. Right as she prepares to take the first question from the press pool, the low, heavy rumble of powerful engines drowns out the reporters' voices. A convoy of 6 black unmarked sport utility vehicles turns sharply off the main road and aggressively blocks the front gates of the Blackwell estate. The vehicles do not park neatly. They stop at sharp angles, completely cutting off any avenue of escape. The doors of the vehicles swing open simultaneously. Over 24 federal agents wearing tactical vests emblazoned with the letters FBI and IRS swarm onto the property. They bypass the shocked reporters and march directly toward the Grand Mansion. The lead agent, a tall woman holding a thick stack of manila folders, walks straight up to the podium. She completely ignores the live television cameras broadcasting the event to millions of viewers. Beatrice Blackwell. The lead agent announces, her voice carrying a cold, clinical authority that shatters Beatrice's grand performance. We are executing a federal seizure warrant issued by the United States District Court. Beatrice recoils, her face turning an ashen, sickly gray. What are you talking about? She demands, her voice trembling wildly. You cannot interrupt a press conference. This is my private property. Not anymore, the agent replies flatly, handing Beatrice the thick stack of legal documents. Forensic accounting has officially confirmed that this estate, along with all associated liquid assets, offshore accounts, and luxury vehicles, were purchased directly using embezzled federal defense funds. Therefore, all assets belonging to you, Harrison Blackwell and Trent Blackwell, are hereby frozen and seized by the federal government under the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Beatrice stares at the paperwork in absolute paralyzed horror. The reporters behind her go completely wild, shouting questions and capturing every single second of her catastrophic downfall on live television. You have exactly 2 minutes to step off federal property before you are arrested for trespassing, the agent states, firmly motioning to 2 armed officers who immediately step forward. Your accounts are frozen. Your credit cards are canceled. This house belongs to the government. The agents move past her, marching up the grand stone steps and placing heavy, bright orange seizure notices directly onto the mahogany front doors. They begin methodically locking down the estate, securing the vehicles in the driveway, and restricting all access to the property. Beatrice drops the legal documents. The papers scatter across the manicured lawn. She turns in a slow, panicked circle, watching her entire universe evaporate into thin air. The boutique public relations team she hired immediately packs up their equipment and sprints for their cars, abandoning her entirely. The federal agent stepped forward and physically hurled Beatrice down the driveway, forcing her past the relentless flashing cameras of the press pool. They march her straight through the heavy iron gates and deposit her unceremoniously on the public sidewalk. The gates slam shut behind her with a heavy metallic clang that signifies the absolute end of her reign. Beatrice Blackwell now stands completely alone on the cold concrete curb, suddenly surrounded by ravenous reporters aggressively demanding a statement. She has no cell phone, no house keys, no money, and absolutely no remaining allies left. She is left standing entirely all alone on the cold, dark street in her ruined designer suit, desperately clutching her empty hands, possessing absolutely nothing but the clothes on her back. The morning sun rises over the imposing concrete and steel expanse of the Naval Air Station. The crisp breeze blowing off the Atlantic does nothing to wash away the surreal intensity of the previous 48 hours. Inside my office, the atmosphere is strictly business. The secure phones have been ringing off the hook with Pentagon brass looking for detailed debriefs, but my command staff is acting as a flawless, impenetrable buffer. I am sitting behind my desk reviewing the damage assessments of Apex Defense Solutions when the secure line buzzes sharply. It is the visitor control center at the front gate. The young petty officer on the other end of the line sounds incredibly stressed and entirely out of his depth. He informs me that a civilian is currently creating a massive escalating disturbance at the vehicle inspection checkpoint. She is refusing to leave the premises, screaming at the top of her lungs that she is family and demanding to see me and my husband. I know exactly who it is before the guard even attempts to mispronounce her name. Colin is already here. He came to the military base early this morning to drop off some fresh uniforms for me and to sign the final official witness statements with the Naval Criminal Investigative Service field office. He is sitting quietly on the black leather sofa in the corner of my office, nursing a styrofoam cup of black coffee. He looks physically tired but remarkably grounded. The heavy, suffocating burden of his family's toxic expectations has been entirely lifted from his shoulders. I put the phone down, look directly at him, and tell him his sister is currently holding up morning traffic at the main gate. Colin does not sigh. He does not panic. He simply nods his head, sets his coffee cup down on the table, and stands up. We walk out of the command building together, taking an unmarked government vehicle down the long stretch of asphalt toward the security perimeter. The visitor center is a chaotic scene. A long line of frustrated commuters stretches back toward the civilian highway. Standing right in the middle of the primary inspection lane, physically blocking a large delivery truck, is Felicity Blackwell. She is a woman who has spent her entire 30 years wrapped in silk cashmere and unearned arrogant entitlement. Today she looks like a woman who has just survived a catastrophic shipwreck. Her beige designer trench coat is severely wrinkled and stained with coffee. Her usually immaculate, heavily styled blonde hair is tied back in a messy, uneven knot at the base of her neck. She is clutching a massive, oversized leather tote bag to her chest like a protective shield. Two heavily armed base security guards are standing a few feet away, maintaining a professional distance, but clearly losing their patience with her high-pitched, hysterical demands. We step out of the vehicle. Felicity spots us instantly. She shoves past a security guard, completely ignoring his stern, loud warning to stay behind the painted yellow line, and sprints wildly toward us. She looks absolutely unhinged. The signature Blackwell arrogance she wore like a second skin has been entirely burned away by sheer unadulterated panic. She stops a few feet from us, her chest heaving violently, her eyes wide and heavily bloodshot. She does not offer a polite greeting. She does not ask how we are dealing with the massive fallout of her parents being indicted for federal treason. She dives straight into her own personal overwhelming tragedy. "They took everything," Felicity gasps, her voice cracking violently under the strain of her panic. "The federal agents showed up at my apartment building at 6 o'clock this morning. They served the property manager with a massive seizure warrant. My trust fund is completely frozen. My personal checking accounts, the offshore accounts Dad set up for me in the Caymans, my platinum credit cards, all of it is totally gone. The bank declined my card when I tried to buy a coffee on the way here." The property manager told me I have exactly 48 hours to vacate the penthouse because the lease was paid through one of Dad's fraudulent shell companies. They are treating me like a common criminal. I did not do anything wrong. I just spent the money. Colin stares quietly at his sister. He does not reach out to comfort her. He keeps his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his dark jacket. He is looking at her as if she is a complete stranger. Felicity does not seem to notice his profound coldness. She is entirely consumed by her own rapidly collapsing universe. She steps closer to him, reaching out desperately to grab his arm. Colin, you have to help me. Felicity begs, heavy tears streaming down her pale face, completely ruining her expensive makeup. You live in a normal house in the suburbs. Your accounts are totally separate from the business. You have Kira's military salary. You are safe from the asset forfeiture. I need a temporary loan. Just $50,000. That is absolutely nothing for you guys. It will just tide me over until the corporate lawyers sort out this massive misunderstanding and unfreeze the family assets. I need to secure a new luxury apartment immediately. I need to pay my personal stylist. I need to hire my own private defense attorney because Dad's lawyers are not returning my calls. Just write me a check, Colin, please. I am begging you. She is still clinging desperately to the delusion that her father will somehow beat the federal government. She still firmly believes this is a temporary inconvenience rather than a permanent destruction of their empire. I step forward, placing myself physically between my husband and his frantic, demanding sister. I look down at her, feeling absolutely zero pity for the woman standing in front of me. There is no misunderstanding, Felicity. I state, my voice ringing with hard, uncompromising authority. Your parents are entirely guilty. Your brother is guilty. Every single dime that funded your luxury lifestyle was stolen from the United States government. The asset freeze is permanent. You are never getting that money back. Felicity glares at me, a brief, ugly flash of her old venomous hatred piercing through her thick layer of panic. Shut up, Kira. I am not talking to you. I am talking to my brother. This is private family business. You have no right to interfere. I let out a short, cold, humorless laugh. I have every right. You are standing on my military installation, actively begging for money from my household. Let us talk about family business, Felicity. Let us talk about exactly 1 year ago. You stood right in the middle of my kitchen. You were drinking my wine. You looked me up and down and told me that my refusal to quit the Navy and join your father's firm was a massive public embarrassment. You looked at my husband and explicitly called me trailer park trash, pulling the family down. You said I lacked the proper breeding to ever truly belong in the Blackwell inner circle. Felicity pales drastically, her eyes darting nervously back and forth. She remembers the incident perfectly well. She remembers exactly how she smiled when she said it, how much she enjoyed trying to make me feel small and insignificant in my own home. That was totally different, she stammers, attempting a pathetic, frantic backpedal. I was just stressed out that day. You are taking my words entirely out of context. You cannot hold a petty grudge when I am literally about to be homeless on the street. I am not holding a grudge, I reply coldly. I am simply reminding you of your own established, highly vocalized standards. You made it abundantly clear that my money, my career, and my very presence were completely beneath your elite status. Why would you ever want a financial loan from a piece of trailer park trash? Surely that dirty money would permanently taint your pristine upper-class hands. Felicity turns desperately back to Colin. She tries to bypass me entirely, utilizing the lifelong toxic manipulation tactics she learned directly from their mother. She attempts to play the innocent victim, widening her eyes and letting out a pathetic, trembling sob designed to break his resolve. Colin, please, she cries, her voice rising to a high, desperate pitch. She is being incredibly cruel. I am your little sister. You cannot just leave me out here on the street. I do not know how to apply for a job. You have to save me. Dad always said family protects family. Colin stands perfectly still for a long, quiet moment. He looks at the weeping woman, finally seeing through the decades of emotional manipulation. He reaches into his jacket pocket. Colin steps forward and hands his sister a single crumpled $20 bill. Take an Uber, he says calmly, throwing her exact past words right back directly in her face. Felicity stares at the crumpled $20 bill in her hand, as if it has physically burned her skin. Her mouth opens and closes, but no sound comes out. The absolute shock of her brother's rejection paralyzes her. Colin turns his back on her, wrapping a supportive arm around my waist, and guides me back toward the unmarked government vehicle. We get inside, the heavy doors slamming shut, sealing out the frantic, hysterical screaming that suddenly erupts from the checkpoint behind us. I do not look back as the driver pulls away. The Blackwell family's social and financial destruction is entirely complete, but the military justice system still demands its pound of flesh. 3 weeks later, the atmosphere inside the military courtroom at the Washington Navy Yard is suffocatingly dense. The walls are paneled in dark, unyielding mahogany, projecting an aura of absolute, uncompromising authority. There are no crystal chandeliers here, no flowing champagne, no sycophantic socialites, eager to flatter the highest bidder. There is only the harsh fluorescent lighting and the severe, impassive faces of the panel of military judges seated behind the elevated bench. This is a court-martial. Lieutenant Trent Blackwell sits at the defense table. He looks entirely diminished, a hollow shell of the arrogant junior officer who once paraded around charity galas mocking his superiors. His service uniform hangs slightly loose on his frame, missing the polished sheen of untouchable privilege. However, a desperate cornered rat is still a rat, and Trent's deeply ingrained entitlement refuses to die quietly. The defense strategy is as predictable as it is pathetic. When Trent takes the stand, his military-appointed defense counsel attempts to paint a picture of a naive, eager junior officer manipulated by a vindictive, calculating superior. Trent leans into the microphone, his voice dripping with a manufactured, highly rehearsed sorrow. He attempts to play the victim, utilizing the exact same toxic manipulation tactics his mother perfected over decades of high society warfare. Commander Bennett has harbored a deep personal vendetta against my family from the very beginning. Trent testifies, looking directly at the panel of military judges with wide, pleading eyes. She comes from a vastly different background. She grew up with nothing. My family represents generational wealth, a pure bloodline of American success and prestige. She was intensely jealous of the life we provided for her husband, my brother. She hated that we did not immediately accept her into our inner circle. She used her high-ranking position on the procurement board to orchestrate an elaborate trap, deliberately feeding me false information to make it look like I was attempting to bypass security protocols. He actually uses the phrase pure bloodline in a federal military court. I sit at the prosecution table, maintaining a perfectly rigid, expressionless mask, but internally I am astounded by his sheer, unadulterated hubris. He genuinely believes that invoking his family's wealth and supposed aristocratic superiority will somehow endear him to a panel of battle-hardened Navy captains and admirals who have dedicated their entire lives to meritocracy and service. The lead prosecutor, a razor-sharp JAG officer with zero tolerance for elitist nonsense, simply lets Trent dig his own grave. Trent continues his rambling, desperate monologue, claiming that I coerced him into the server room. He claims I fabricated the audio recordings and that the entire extortion plot was my own devious invention, designed to seize control of the Blackwell fortune. He paints himself as an innocent pawn, crushed by the ruthless ambition of a lower-class woman desperate for power. When the defense finally rests, the courtroom falls silent. The lead prosecutor stands up, adjusting his uniform, and calls his primary witness to the stand. I rise from my chair. I am wearing my Navy service dress blues, the uniform crisp and immaculate, the gold oak leaves of my rank catching the harsh overhead light. I walk purposefully toward the witness stand. I do not glance at Trent. I swear the oath, take my seat, and look directly at the panel of judges. Commander Bennett, the prosecutor begins, his voice carrying the heavy, solid weight of absolute fact. The defense has alleged that you manipulated Lieutenant Blackwell into accessing secure naval servers and that you fabricated the evidence of his extortion attempts. How do you respond to these allegations? The allegations are entirely false, completely baseless, and directly contradicted by multiple layers of irrefutable unclassified physical evidence. I state my voice ringing with cold, unwavering authority. Lieutenant Blackwell did not act under my coercion. He acted under the direct instruction of his father, Harrison Blackwell, in a coordinated, highly premeditated effort to commit federal defense fraud. Can you detail the specific evidence regarding the server breach? The prosecutor asks, guiding the narrative with surgical precision. Certainly, I reply, my gaze remaining locked on the judges. As the head of the Tactical Aviation Procurement Board, I authorized a localized, heavily monitored honeypot server environment designed specifically to capture unauthorized intrusion attempts. At exactly 0200 hours on the night in question, Lieutenant Blackwell utilized his own encrypted military identification card. He used it to bypass the outer security doors. We have high-definition security footage of him physically inserting a rogue USB drive into a designated terminal. Furthermore, we have the digital forensic logs verified by the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, which trace the exact keystrokes back to his unique user profile. He attempted to upload a payload of fraudulent financial documents to falsely certify Apex Defense Solutions' failing software prototype. Trent shrinks down in his chair at the defense table, his face turning a sickly shade of gray as the undeniable catastrophic weight of the digital evidence crashes down upon his ridiculous defense strategy. And regarding the allegations of extortion and blackmail, the prosecutor continues stepping closer to the witness stand. The extortion was explicit, aggressive, and thoroughly documented. I testify without a shred of hesitation. When I initially flagged their software for failing critical security benchmarks, the Blackwell family launched a coordinated attack. They filed an anonymous, fabricated tip with the Inspector General accusing me of accepting foreign bribes, which temporarily suspended my top-secret clearance. They subsequently threatened to leverage their political connections to have me imprisoned unless I approved their contract. Lieutenant Blackwell was an active, willing participant in this blackmail. He directly threatened my career and my freedom in front of multiple witnesses. The prosecutor turns to the panel of judges. Commander Bennett, to be absolutely clear, did you at any point orchestrate a trap due to personal jealousy regarding the defendant's wealth or family background? No. I answer, my voice slicing through the courtroom like a freshly sharpened blade. My sole objective was to protect the integrity of the United States Navy and to ensure that our aviators are not equipped with compromised, failing technology supplied by fraudulent contractors. Lieutenant Blackwell's family wealth is completely irrelevant to his blatant violations. He betrayed his oath, he betrayed his uniform, and he actively attempted to compromise national security for his own personal financial gain. The defense attorney attempts to cross-examine me desperately, trying to rattle my composure by bringing up my modest childhood and my strained relationship with Beatrice. I do not take the bait. I answer every single question with cold clinical facts, returning repeatedly to the digital logs, the security footage, and the audio recordings of their explicit threats. I systematically dismantle every single lie Trent tried to sell to the court. By the time I am dismissed from the witness stand, the defense's entire narrative has been thoroughly, undeniably pulverized into dust. The closing arguments are swift. The prosecutor paints Trent not as a victim, but as a dangerous, arrogant opportunist who believed his family's bank accounts placed him above the law. The panel of military judges retires to deliberate. The wait is agonizingly short, a clear indicator that there is absolutely no debate regarding his guilt. When the judges return to the courtroom, the atmosphere is heavy with the impending weight of ultimate consequence. We all rise to our feet. Trent is shaking so violently that the defense table vibrates. He looks absolutely terrified, finally realizing that his mother cannot buy his way out. The presiding judge, a stern, deeply formidable admiral, reads the verdict. The words hit the silent room like hammer strikes. Lieutenant Trent Blackwell, on the charges of attempting to breach secure naval networks, conspiracy to commit federal defense fraud conduct, unbecoming an officer, and the active extortion of a superior commanding officer. This court-martial finds you guilty on all counts. You are hereby stripped of all military rank and privileges. You are sentenced to receive a dishonorable discharge from the United States Navy. Furthermore, you are sentenced to serve 15 years of confinement in a federal military penitentiary. May God have mercy on your soul. As Trent is finally led away, he looks at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. I do not look back at him. I simply salute the judge. The swift and brutal military justice delivered to Trent sends a massive shockwave directly into the civilian federal courts. Harrison Blackwell, the untouchable titan of the defense contracting industry, watches his golden child stripped of his rank and sentenced to 15 years in a military penitentiary. The utter destruction of his son finally breaks Harrison's arrogant resolve. He realizes that his expensive corporate defense attorneys cannot magically erase the mountain of digital evidence, the audio recordings, and the sworn testimonies, proving his widespread fraud and extortion. Facing a potential life sentence under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, Harrison capitulates completely. He instructs his legal team to negotiate with the federal prosecutors. The resulting plea deal is swift and entirely merciless. Harrison pleads guilty to massive federal bribery, systemic defense fraud, and conspiracy to extort a military officer. The federal judge, citing the severe national security implications of Harrison's crimes, accepts the plea but refuses to offer leniency. Harrison is sentenced to a full decade in a maximum security federal prison with absolutely no possibility of early parole. The judge also mandates the permanent forfeiture of all his corporate assets, officially dismantling Apex Defense Solutions and erasing the Blackwell financial empire from existence. The mighty kingmaker of Washington is reduced to a federal inmate number, stripped of his custom-tailored suits, and forced into a standard-issue orange jumpsuit. While Harrison trades his Georgetown mansion for a concrete cell, Beatrice is left to navigate the harsh, unforgiving reality of absolute financial ruin. The federal asset seizure strips away everything she has ever known. Her luxury vehicles, her offshore accounts, her extensive jewelry collection, and her sprawling estates are completely liquidated by the government to pay restitution. She is forced to vacate her temporary hotel room when her last remaining credit card is violently declined. The former queen of Washington high society, a woman who once commanded armies of caterers and decorators, is now living in a tiny, cramped studio apartment on the undesirable outskirts of the city. She has no staff, no personal driver, and absolutely no social standing. The elite circle of wealthy socialites she once ruled with an iron fist has completely abandoned her, treating her name like a highly contagious disease. Her carefully constructed universe of privilege has evaporated, leaving behind a bitter, desperate woman who still cannot comprehend that her actions have permanent, unalterable consequences. 6 months after Harrison is locked away, the harsh reality of her new life finally breaks through Beatrice's stubborn denial. She realizes that the massive civil suits filed against her for corporate damages will keep her permanently destitute. In a final, desperate bid for survival, she resorts to the only tactic she has left. She attempts to manipulate the very people she tried to destroy. I am sitting at the kitchen island in my home enjoying a quiet Saturday morning with a fresh cup of coffee when I notice a thick cream envelope sitting at the bottom of our mail stack. The return address is missing, but the looping, overly ornate handwriting is instantly recognizable. It is a handwritten letter from Beatrice. I do not open it immediately. I sit there staring at the thick paper, feeling a strange sense of detachment. A year ago, the mere sight of her handwriting would have sent a spike of anxiety straight through my chest. Now I feel nothing but mild clinical curiosity. Colin walks into the kitchen, his hair slightly damp from a morning run. He pours himself a cup of coffee and leans against the counter, noticing the envelope resting on the marble island. He recognizes the handwriting instantly. His posture does not stiffen. He does not clench his jaw. He simply takes a sip of his coffee and looks at me, offering a calm, steady nod. I slide my finger under the seal and pull out the heavy, embossed stationery. She is using the last remnants of her personalized stock, clinging desperately to the illusion of her former wealth. I unfold the letter and begin reading the words aloud to my husband. The contents are a breathtaking masterpiece of narcissistic delusion and toxic manipulation. Beatrice does not begin with a genuine apology. She begins by complaining bitterly about her current living conditions. She writes about the peeling paint in her studio apartment, the noise from the street, and the indignity of having to use public transportation. She describes her situation as a tragic injustice, completely ignoring the fact that her own greed and malicious actions placed her there. I know tensions were high last year, Beatrice writes, her words echoing loudly in our quiet kitchen. We all said things we did not entirely mean during a very stressful business transition. I am willing to apologize for any minor misunderstandings that may have occurred between us. Family must always find a way to forgive. I pause, looking up at Colin. He shakes his head slowly, a faint, humorless smile touching his lips. Any minor misunderstandings. That is how she categorizes a coordinated federal extortion plot, the attempted destruction of my military career, and the active blackmail of a commanding officer. She reduces systemic criminal malice to a simple failure of communication. I continue reading the letter. The true purpose of her sudden desire for family forgiveness quickly reveals itself in the second paragraph. Beatrice is bleeding dry. The ongoing civil litigation regarding the recovery of embezzled funds is preventing her from securing any type of financial foothold. She cannot afford her expensive lawyers, and she certainly cannot afford to maintain even a fraction of the lifestyle she believes she inherently deserves. I am asking you and Colin to speak with the prosecutors. The letter continues, the ink slightly smudged, as if she pressed the pen down too hard in her desperation. You have the power to drop the civil suits against me. You have made your point. Harrison and Trent are paying the price. But I am an innocent woman caught in the crossfire. If you drop the suits, the frozen accounts might be released back to me. I just need enough to secure a respectable townhouse and afford my basic essential lifestyle. You have your successful careers. You do not need this money, please, Kira. You owe it to the Blackwell name to show some grace. I stop reading and place the letter flat on the kitchen island. I look at the ornate signature at the bottom of the page. The silence in the kitchen is profound, but it is not tense. It is completely tranquil. I wait for the familiar surge of righteous anger to hit me. I expect to feel the hot, burning indignation that fueled my fight against their corruption for the past year. I expect Colin to slam his coffee mug down on the counter and launch into a furious tirade about his mother's breathtaking audacity. Neither of those things happens. I look at Colin, truly studying his face. The deep, heavy shadows of familial obligation that used to haunt his eyes are completely gone. He looks entirely at peace. He looks at the letter, and then he looks at me. We do not feel anger. We do not feel a desire for revenge. We do not feel pity, and we certainly do not feel any lingering sense of familial duty. We feel absolute, profound indifference. Beatrice is no longer a looming, terrifying threat. She is just a sad, desperate woman writing letters from a tiny apartment, entirely trapped inside a delusional reality of her own making. The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is complete and total apathy. Colin reaches across the island and picks up the letter. He does not reread it. He does not tear it up in a fit of rage. He walks calmly over to the small, strong paper shredder sitting on the desk in the corner of our kitchen. He turns the machine on. The mechanical whirring fills the room. He feeds the thick cream paper directly into the metal teeth. We stand together and watch as Beatrice's final desperate plea for unearned redemption is methodically sliced into hundreds of tiny, completely illegible ribbons. There will be absolutely no dramatic, lengthy confrontation. There will be no loud, emotional shouting match. There will be no sudden redemption arc for them. We pull out our cell phones simultaneously. We access our contact lists, find the newly acquired prepaid numbers she has been using to try and bypass our blocks, and we permanently block those as well. We are sealing the final doors, closing the last remaining windows, and officially cutting the final cord to a toxic past that no longer holds any power over our lives. I unplug the shredder. empty the basket of shredded paper directly into the recycling bin, and turn back to my husband. The shadow operation is completely over, the dark threat is totally neutralized, and our bright future finally belongs entirely to us. The silence in our kitchen stretches out rich and absolute. Colin tosses the prepaid phone packaging into the trash and pulls me into a grounding embrace. The physical weight of the Blackwell family has evaporated from our shoulders. We spend the weekend unplugged, ignoring the frantic news cycles detailing the liquidation of Apex Defense Solutions. When Monday morning arrives, I put on my service dress blues with a renewed sense of purpose. I drive onto the Naval Air Station in Portland, expecting another day of damage assessments. Instead, I am immediately summoned to the base commander's office. The walk down the hallway feels different today. The whispers have stopped. The sideways glances have been replaced by crisp, respectful salutes. Admiral Vance sits behind his heavy oak desk, looking remarkably relaxed. He motions for me to sit and pushes a white folder across the polished wood. He informs me that the Inspector General has officially concluded their investigation into the anonymous tip. The charges of accepting foreign bribes have been unequivocally proven false. They have been fully exposed as a malicious fabrication engineered by Harrison Blackwell to force my compliance. My top-secret security clearance is fully restored without a single negative mark on my record. The suffocating cloud of suspicion that Beatrice and Harrison tried to hang over my head has been eradicated by the harsh light of absolute undeniable truth. Admiral Vance does not stop there. He stands up, his expression shifting to genuine respect. He tells me that my refusal to capitulate to the Blackwell family's extortion, my meticulous documentation of their threats, and my unwavering commitment to ethical procurement have saved the Navy billions of taxpayer dollars. More importantly, my actions have potentially saved countless aviator lives by preventing faulty software from being installed in active combat aircraft. He reaches into his desk drawer and hands me a velvet-lined box containing a meritorious service medal. The citation highlights my exceptional integrity and moral courage in the face of severe intimidation from a defense contractor. Then the Admiral offers a proposition that makes my heart pound with excitement. The Navy is overhauling its Pacific Fleet Procurement and Tactical Integration Command. They need an officer with a spotless record, someone who cannot be bought, intimidated, or compromised. He offers me a highly prestigious command position stationed directly at Pearl Harbor. It is a massive career leap. It is a role that bypasses several senior officers and places me at the forefront of naval aviation strategy. I accept the position before he even finishes detailing the operational budget. I leave his office, holding the commendation box tightly, my career launched into an entirely new stratosphere. I call Colin the moment I reach my car. When I tell him about the Pearl Harbor Command, he lets out a loud, joyous shout. The next 3 weeks are a chaotic whirlwind of logistical planning and deep, profound emotional cleansing. We begin packing our house in Portland, methodically sorting through years of accumulated belongings. We are leaving the Pacific Northwest behind forever. We are leaving the bitter cold, the relentless rain, the toxic memories of Trent's sneering, uninvited visits, and the suffocating proximity to the mainland elite who enabled Harrison's corruption. We gleefully donate the expensive, gaudy wedding gifts Beatrice originally forced upon us, permanently purging our home of anything that bears the invisible, tainted stain of Blackwell money. We pack only what truly matters to us, the things we built, purchased, and earned together through our own hard work. Colin works alongside me with a relentless energy. He legally changes his emergency contacts, updates his life insurance beneficiaries, and ensures his architectural business portfolios are completely secured behind independent trusts. He systematically severs the final legal ties to his parents' ruined estate. As we load the last moving pod and lock the front door of our old house for the final time, we do not feel a single ounce of sorrow. We drive to the airport, board a direct flight across the Pacific Ocean, and watch the mainland slowly disappear beneath the heavy clouds. We are truly independent now. We are entirely free from their financial manipulation, their psychological abuse, and their desperate need for absolute control. Hawaii greets us with warm tropical air and the sharp, salty scent of the ocean. My new command at Pearl Harbor is demanding, complex, and deeply fulfilling. I spend my days overhauling tactical software acquisitions across the entire fleet, stripping away bureaucratic bloat, and ensuring that our fighter pilots receive only the most rigorously tested equipment available. I command a dedicated team of brilliant officers who share my absolute commitment to integrity. Colin thrives in his new environment just as much. He secures a senior partnership at a highly successful architecture firm in Honolulu that actively values his talent over his disgraced last name. We build a beautiful, quiet life together in a house overlooking the crystal blue water thousands of miles away from the federal penitentiaries where Harrison and Trent now reside. 6 months into my new command, the Pacific Fleet hosts its annual Winter Military Ball. The grand ballroom of the historic Moana Surfrider Hotel is transformed into a spectacular display of military tradition and elegant tropical luxury. The gentle sound of the ocean waves blends perfectly with the soft jazz playing from the live band on the stage. I am wearing my formal dinner dress uniform, the thick gold braid gleaming against the dark fabric, my new meritorious service medal pinned proudly to my chest. Colin looks devastatingly handsome in a classic, perfectly tailored black tuxedo. He is completely at ease in a room full of high-ranking military officials, foreign dignitaries, and wealthy civilian contractors. He is no longer the burdened son of a corrupt billionaire. He is his own man. We are standing near the edge of the polished wooden dance floor, quietly enjoying cold glasses of vintage champagne when a man intentionally approaches us. He is a newly minted executive for a mid-tier defense logistics company, wearing a flashy suit and a bright, aggressive smile that screams unearned confidence. He reeks of the exact same toxic ambition that Trent used to radiate. He zeroes in on Colin immediately, clearly recognizing the distinct Blackwell facial features, but completely ignorant of the fact that the family name no longer carries any corporate power. He assumes Colin is still a vastly wealthy socialite, and he foolishly assumes I am simply a decorative companion standing by his side. Colin Blackwell, it is an absolute pleasure to finally meet you in person, the young executive says, thrusting his hand forward with a forced, completely false familiarity. I was really hoping to run into you tonight. My firm is currently rolling out a brand new logistics framework for the Pacific Theater, and I would absolutely love to get your family's firm on board as our primary backer. I know your father has an incredible eye for emerging tech and highly profitable government contracts. I would love to set up a private meeting with him next week. The man's sheer, unfiltered ignorance is almost comical. He has clearly not read a single newspaper in over 6 months, or he is simply too arrogant to care about the details. He finally glances over at me, offering a quick, patronizing smile. And this gorgeous woman must be your lovely wife. Enjoying the free drinks and the open bar on the Navy's dime tonight, are we? I do not flinch at all. I do not say a single word in my own defense. I simply raise my right eyebrow, letting the heavy, suffocating silence stretch out between us until the tense interaction becomes painfully, agonizingly uncomfortable for him to bear. Colin does not get angry. He does not raise his voice or lose his immaculate composure. He simply offers the nervous executive a cool, entirely unbothered, and razor-sharp smile. He takes a slow step back, gently placing a supportive hand on the small of my back, and gestures toward me with a slow, highly deliberate nod of profound respect. Actually, Colin states, his voice carrying the absolute uncompromising weight of genuine pride and total finality. My father is currently serving a decade in federal prison. I am simply a civilian architect. And if you ever want to discuss acquiring any lucrative defense contracts on this island, you will need to address the commander. The executive's arrogant smile instantly vanishes from his face. His eyes drop down to the heavy, shining gold rank insignia displayed prominently on my uniform sleeves, and then shift directly to the meritorious service medal pinned securely over my heart. All the color rapidly drains from his cheeks, leaving him looking exactly like a terrified, cornered animal who has just realized he walked directly into a trap. He stammers a pathetic apology, taking 2 rapid, stumbling steps backward before turning around and practically sprinting away into the crowded ballroom to hide his immense humiliation. I look up at my husband. He looks down at me, his eyes shining brilliantly with profound love, deep admiration, and absolute unwavering respect. The lingering ghost of his family's toxic legacy has been completely exorcised from our lives, forever leaving behind only the future that we have built together. I raise my crystal glass, take a slow, highly satisfying sip of my cold champagne, and look out over the glittering, vibrant ballroom entirely in control of my own magnificent empire. The ashes of a burned bridge often provide the clearest path forward. In our lives, we are frequently taught that family is an unbreakable bond, a sacred tie that must be preserved at all costs. The reality is that blood does not excuse abuse, and shared history is never a free pass for ongoing manipulation. When you find yourself trapped in a cycle of toxic expectations where your worth is constantly minimized and your boundaries are repeatedly violated, the most profound act of self-love is walking away. You cannot heal in the exact same environment that intentionally broke you. True power does not come from stooping to the level of those who seek to destroy you. It comes from maintaining your absolute integrity, documenting the truth, and allowing their own towering arrogance to be their ultimate undoing. Cutting ties with manipulative family members is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of sheer survival. When you stop pouring your precious energy into a bottomless well of narcissistic demands, you reclaim your future. You open the door to build an empire on your own terms, surrounded only by people who respect your boundaries and celebrate your authentic self. The highest form of revenge is never a loud, dramatic confrontation. It is absolute, unwavering indifference. It is turning your back on their chaos and living a highly successful, joyful life entirely out of their reach. Have you ever had to draw a hard line and walk away from toxic family dynamics to protect your own peace and build your own empire? Share your experiences in the comments below, and please hit the like button and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about reclaiming your power and forging a completely new horizon.